Chapter 45-27. Lu Jiajin said. My suggestion is to have someone go to the 4 continents and bring the monarchs, human supremes, and divine kings here. What? Bring them to the central dynasty? Dong Qingyuan, Kuan-peng, the dragon god, and Dong Hanzong were all dumbfounded. Even the emperor and his wife were puzzled. Even they couldn't do anything to Qin Feiyang and the others. What could the monarch and his wife do? You must be thinking that the monarch and his wife are useless in this battle. But that's not the case. The monarch has 3,000 incarnations, the divine king has the mark of the gods, and the divine king has the sword of faith. Most importantly, the monarch's 10 grandfathers and 5 grandmothers all have 3,000 incarnations. The reason why Qin Feiyang and the others didn't dare to kill the purple gold divine dragons in the 4 great continents is because they are afraid of the 15 old men. Think about it. If we invite them to the central dynasty, how much help will they be to us? Lu Jiajin smiled. After hearing Lu Jiajin's detailed explanation, the emperor was tempted. Your Majesty, please think twice. The 3 races are just livestock that we keep in the 4 great continents. How can the central dynasty face if we ask for help from a bunch of livestock? Dong Qingyuan looked at the emperor and shouted. What did you say? Xian Mo's eyes darkened as she stared at Dong Qingyuan. Who are you calling an animal? Say it again if you dare. I'll cripple you. Dong Qingyuan clenched his hands and glared at the inner demons. Did I say that? Of course. Because we were born in the 4 great continents. You said that the creatures in the 4 great continents are livestock. Doesn't that include us? But it's ridiculous. The creatures in the 4 great continents are loyal to the divine kingdom, but in your eyes, they're just livestock. I wonder what the creatures in the 4 great continents would think if they knew about this. The inner demons sneered. If they didn't treat the creatures in the 4 great continents as human beings, what was the point of the central dynasty existing? No. Such a vicious and inhumane group of people must be exterminated. Seeing that the inner demons were angry, Dong Qingyuan panicked and hurriedly explained. You and your brother have entered the central dynasty, and are no longer from the 4 great continents, so I didn't say anything about you. Dong Qingyuan, shut up. The woman in white raised her eyebrows and looked at Dong Qingyuan with an extremely displeased expression. She said in a deep voice, It doesn't matter if the brothers are from the 4 great continents or not, you can't say such words. If word got out, the beings of the 4 continents would be the first ones to rebel against the central dynasty. Yes, Your Highness. I'll definitely watch my mouth in the future. I won't dare to talk nonsense anymore. Dong Qingyuan quickly lowered his head and apologized. Stupid thing. The white-robed woman mumbled. How could the Legion commander of the Death Legion say such words? She had known Dong Qingyuan for a long time. In the past, Dong Qingyuan was not someone who would shoot his mouth off. But why was Dong Qingyuan acting like a clown now? Looking flustered and exasperated every day. The emperor looked at Dong Qingyuan with a hint of disappointment in his eyes. However, compared to the white-robed woman's confusion, he knew why Dong Qingyuan had become like this. On the one hand, he thought he was smart and offended the Lu brothers. As a result, he suffered the crazy revenge of the 2 brothers. On the other hand, it was because Qin Feiyang and the others had suffered losses at the hands of Qin Feiyang and the others time and time again, which had made Dong Qingyuan on the verge of collapse. However, even so, the emperor's trust in Dong Qingyuan had not changed, because the emperor knew very well that even if Dong Qingyuan killed the family of the Lu brothers, his ultimate goal was to get rid of Qin Feiyang and the others to protect the peace of the divine kingdom. It was just that his methods were a bit extreme. In other words, putting everything else aside, no one was more loyal to the divine kingdom and the emperor than Dong Qingyuan. Because of this, the emperor had always been protecting him. The emperor was silent for a while. He looked at the Kuan-peng and the dragon god and asked, What do you think of Lu Yunfeng's proposal? The 2 of them looked at each other. We agree with Lu Yunfeng's proposal. We have also heard of the dozen or so elders of the Purple Gold Divine Dragon clan. Not only do they have 3,000 incarnations, but they are also very powerful. Yes. Each of their 3,000 incarnations is equivalent to the combat power of 3,000 people. If they join the Central Dynasty, it will be like adding wings to a tiger for the Central Dynasty. The two of them expressed their opinions. They did not belong to the Death God army, so they did not need to consider Dong Qingyuan's attitude. Since you are all the same, then let's do this. Immediately send people to the 4 great continents to bring them here. The emperor said. The woman in white looked at the emperor and shook her head. Ordinary people can't bring them to the Central Dynasty. Hearing this, the emperor's face froze as if he suddenly thought of something. Why do you say that? Lu Jiajin looked at the couple in confusion. The woman in white sighed. You two don't know yet, but the Dong family and the Purple Gold Divine Dragon clan have many conflicts. Conflicts? Lu Jiajin and the inner demons were stunned. It's very complicated. Fine. I'll go to the 4 great continents myself. The woman in white sighed. Her expression was full of helplessness. Ah. The emperor turned to look at the woman in white. He seemed to be opposed to it. You are the emperor, so you have to take care of the emperor's face. But I'm different. I'm just an ordinary woman. Even if they want me to lower my head and beg them, it's nothing. The woman in white smiled. But, the emperor frowned. The woman in white waved her hand and interrupted the emperor. There are some things that someone has to face and solve. Running away is not the solution. The emperor was silent for a while. He grabbed the woman's hand and sighed. Then I'll leave it to you. But if those old things don't know what's good for them, you don't have to be polite with them. I know what to do. The woman in white smiled. What kind of conflict is it? Why is it so troublesome for the emperor and his wife? The inner demons and Lu Jiajin looked at each other. Their hearts were full of doubts. The Black Tortoise Realm. Soul Sealing Valley. Compared to the heavy atmosphere of the imperial capital mountain, the atmosphere here was very cheerful. Because this time, they had captured too many beasts. It might be the sum of the Sea Clan, Beast Clan, and Taboo Ocean sea beasts that were captured in the 4 continents. Moreover, there were also hundreds of millions of spirit veins and crystal veins that were swept away. It could be said that a Sky Dragon mountain range could create a holy land. The person who had the hardest time depriving the ultimate profound was naturally Long Qin. But this time, Li Zhongxing, Xiao Shui, and the old poison didn't come to help. Because Qin Feiyang didn't call them at all. Because now they were at the critical moment of their seclusion. So, Qin Feiyang, White-Eyed Wolf, Frenzy Li Feng, Long Qin Demon Ancestor, Mu Tianyang Mu Qing, Dong Xingyang, Sea Lion Demon King, and Dong Qin. These people who had mastered the will of heaven personally took action to assist Long Qin. Looking at this scene, Dong Qin couldn't help but sigh. With Long Qin, not to mention terrifying people like Qin Feiyang, even an inconspicuous small family could become an overlord in a very short time. Because as long as Long Qin was here, there would be endless inheritances. Now, she also realized, the most terrifying person in the Black Tortoise world wasn't Qin Feiyang, but this man named Long Qin. Without Long Qin, the people and beasts here wouldn't have grown so fast. Old Qin, this Central Dynasty is really not something the 4 continents can compare to. Just the Sky Dragon mountain range alone allowed us to obtain so many ultimate profound. Frenzy laughed. He didn't have the temperament of a blood demon king, but a wretched little old man. What a joke. Can the 4 continents be compared to the Central Dynasty? Let's talk about it later. The Sky Dragon mountain range is the base camp of the beasts. Any beast that can enter the Sky Dragon mountain range must at least master 1 ultimate profound. You guys caught all the beasts in the Sky Dragon mountain range in one fell swoop. How can there be less ultimate profound? Dong Qin said with a proud face. What are you proud of? Now you're one of us, and have nothing to do with the Central Dynasty. Frenzy pursed his lips. Dong Qin wanted to refute, but for a moment, she couldn't find a reason to refute. She could only stomp her feet and stand aside sulking. And you have to thank us. If it weren't for our help, your mother would have followed in your father's footsteps. And your clansmen must have become ghosts under Dong Hanzong's hands. Frenzy laughed. Dong Qin's eyes trembled, and her hands suddenly clenched together. Murderous aura surged as she murmured. Dong Hanzong, Dong Qingyuan, I will not let you go. Qin Feiyang and the others looked at Dong Qin and couldn't help but show a sympathetic look. This woman was infatuated with Dong Hanzong, but in the end, how did Dong Hanzong treat her? Clang! Suddenly, two loud noises sounded in the Devil's Land. But Qin Feiyang and the others didn't hear it. After all, the Black Tortoise boundary was comparable to the 4 continents of the Sky Cloud boundary. The distance between the Devil's Land and the Soul Ceiling Valley was also very far. Qin Dage, come back quickly. But in the next moment, Fire Lotus's voice sounded in Qin Feiyang's mind. Qin Feiyang was startled and asked, "What's the matter?" Fire Lotus said, "The 2 pinnacle sovereign divine weapons are resisting, and the castle seems to be unable to suppress them." What? They still dare to resist? Qin Feiyang's eyes suddenly turned cold. He turned to look at Long Chen and said, "I'll leave this place to you. I'll go back to the Devil's Land." Okay. Long Chen nodded. Qin Feiyang took a step forward and instantly arrived above the castle. Clang! Rumble! A series of deafening noises suddenly sounded in their ears. Qin Feiyang looked down and saw that the castle had already risen into the air and was suspended in the air. It was constantly trembling, and its aura was surging. Fire Lotus, Pei Hongyu, and Pei Dason were standing below, protecting the surrounding medicine fields and tea gardens with all their strength. Chapter 45-28. If it weren't for the 3 of them, the herbal field and tea garden would have been destroyed. Young master. They're struggling in the castle. Seeing Qin Feiyang's arrival, Pei Dason was immediately wild with joy and hurriedly shouted. The 2 pinnacle sovereign divine weapons were brought to the Black Tortoise world by Qin Feiyang. They were suppressed in the cultivation room of the castle. A day outside was equivalent to 5,000 years in the Black Tortoise world. When they were brought in, the 2 sovereign divine weapons were heavily injured and had no power to resist. However, after years of recuperation in the Black Tortoise world, they had recovered a lot and wanted to escape. Thus, and that was why this scene had occurred. Let them out. Qin Feiyang's eyes were gloomy as he looked at the castle. They dared to act rashly in the Black Tortoise world. They were really reckless. Clang! With a loud sound, a stone door on the 2nd floor of the castle opened and 2 broken sovereign divine weapons rushed out of the cultivation room. They were a bronze mirror and a divine pagoda. The bronze mirror was the size of a palm leaf fan and was bronze in color. There were skulls engraved around the frame of the mirror, giving it a ferocious look. There was also an ancient stone door engraved on the back of the mirror, giving off a mysterious aura. The divine pagoda was the size of a palm. Upon closer inspection, the palm-sized divine pagoda had 999 levels. It was completely black and had complex runes engraved on it. There were suns, moons, stars, mountains, rivers, and even ghosts. It gave off a strong sense of danger. However, even though they were 2 pinnacle sovereign divine weapons, Qin Feiyang didn't care about them. The 2 sovereign divine weapons broke out of the castle and prepared to escape the Devil's Land. This is the Black Tortoise world. Where can you escape to? Qin Feiyang said. The power of the Black Tortoise world's laws surged in from all directions and trapped the 2 sovereign divine weapons. The 2 sovereign divine weapons had only recovered a little and could barely exert some of their strength. Otherwise, with their level, it was impossible for the castle, which was a mid-level dominator weapon, to suppress them for so long. The Black Tortoise world. Since there's nowhere to run, we'll destroy the Black Tortoise world. The 2 sovereign divine weapons roared. Shatter the Black Tortoise world? You sure talk big. You should be glad that you didn't destroy the herb fields and tea gardens in the Devil's Land. Otherwise, even if you have pinnacle sovereign divine weapons, I would still kill you. As Qin Feiyang's voice fell, the power of rules surged, suppressing the 2 sovereign divine weapons until they couldn't move at all. The Devil's Land was his headquarters. Whether it was the people he cared about or the things he cared about, they were all in the Devil's Land. For example, the tea plantation. If the tea garden was destroyed, he wouldn't even let go of a legendary dominator divine weapon, let alone a pinnacle dominator divine weapon. In his eyes, the value of a legendary dominator divine weapon couldn't compare to the value of a tea garden. Just let us go. The 2 sovereigns' divine weapons were terrified. Qin Feiyang looked at the two sovereign weapons and nodded. Fine, I'll let you go. However, the price is that your souls will be destroyed. Can you accept this price? The two divine weapons shuddered. It was clear that he wanted to destroy them. What is it? You also know fear? Qin Feiyang smiled disdainfully and said, Then I'll give you the second choice, submit to me. Impossible. The two divine weapons didn't even hesitate and answered quite straightforwardly. Because they knew too well the methods of the Emperor and the Divine Kingdom's dominator. Traitors wouldn't have a good ending. Although Qin Feiyang and the others had already displayed terrifying methods, compared to the Emperor and the Divine Kingdom's dominator, they were still far from it. Is it really impossible? The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched. Boom. The power of rules roared. The two sovereign divine weapons were immediately distorted by the pressure and screamed in pain. Following you is simply a road to death. It's better to be straightforward and let us die a little faster. But even so, the two sovereign divine weapons had no intention of compromising and continued to roar. Qin Feiyang frowned. It was really a bit difficult to deal with. It seemed that he could only suppress them in the soul-sealing valley first. Frankly speaking, if the two pinnacle dominator divine weapons were really destroyed, he would be a little reluctant. Immediately, he forcefully took the two sovereign divine weapons and landed in the sky above the soul-sealing valley. Long Chun and the others raised their heads and looked at Qin Feiyang and the two sovereign divine weapons with a trace of suspicion in their eyes. However, when they saw Qin Feiyang directly suppress the two sovereign divine weapons in the soul-sealing valley, they immediately understood what was going on. It stinks. The two sovereign divine weapons roared. They didn't take it seriously at first, but when they entered the soul-sealing valley, they realized that the stench here could actually penetrate their bodies. It could even penetrate the bodies of the sovereign divine weapons. One could imagine how terrifying the stench here was. The stench here was to the point where it could prevent their bodies from healing. In fact, it wasn't the stench here that was preventing their bodies from healing, but the power of rules in the Black Tortoise world. Of course, this was Qin Feiyang's doing in the dark. After all, these two pinnacle dominator divine weapons would definitely cause chaos in the Black Tortoise world once their bodies were healed. You guys stay here and think about it. Qin Feiyang looked at the two sovereign divine weapons and said indifferently. He then turned around and returned to Long Chen's side and continued to busy himself. Imperial Capital Mountain. What are you thinking? Why did you let the monarch and the others come to the central dynasty to help the emperor and the others? In a secluded place, the inner demons looked at Lu Jiajin suspiciously. Facing this question, Lu Jiajin smiled faintly and said, Do you really think I'm helping the emperor and the others? The inner demons lowered their heads and pondered. Now the battlefield between us and the Divine Kingdom has shifted to the Central Dynasty. And the Central Dynasty has always been in a state of lockdown. Even if the monarch and the others want to, they can't enter the Central Dynasty to help us. So, we have to find an opportunity to let the monarch and the others enter the Central Dynasty. Lu Jiajin smiled. So that's how it is. The inner demons nodded in realization. On the surface, it was to let the monarch and the others come to the Central Dynasty to help the emperor and the others, but in reality, it was to help themselves. The future battlefield was already destined to be in the Central Dynasty. If they didn't think of a way to bring the monarch and the others to the Central Dynasty, they wouldn't be able to help in the end. On the contrary, as long as the monarch and the others entered the Central Dynasty, coupled with the current strength and foundation of Qin Feiyang and the others, there was no doubt that they would have a higher chance of winning against the Central Dynasty. At this moment, the inner demons couldn't help but admire Lu Jiajin's brain. He was really worthy of being called a brain. Also on the same night, Tianxian City. This was one of the top 10 super cities. The top 10 super cities were the clans of the top 10 direct descendant families. The owner of Tianxian City was the 10th direct descendant family. The family head was called Dong Liming, and he was a powerhouse of the will of heaven. He didn't participate in the battle in the Myriad Demons Valley, because such a big city, such a big family definitely needed one or two powerhouses of the will of heaven to stay behind. Late at night, Dong Liming sat in the pavilion of the mansion, with a pot of green tea on the stone table in front of him. The fragrance of the tea assailed his nostrils. But at this moment, he wasn't in the mood to drink tea. His face was full of worry. Originally, he thought that this time in the Myriad Demons Valley, he would definitely be able to get rid of Qin Feiyang and the others. But he didn't expect that even with the power of the entire Central Dynasty, the other party still escaped. This was not the most important thing. Because even if Qin Feiyang and the others escaped, their target would definitely be the Imperial Capital Mountain and the Death God Army. So at first he wasn't too worried. But not long after, there was news of a bloodbath in the Sky Dragon Mountain range. This time, he couldn't help but feel nervous. Obviously, this was the revenge of Qin Feiyang and the others. So he was very terrified. Qin Feiyang and the others had massacred the Sky Dragon Mountain range. Would they also massacred the top 10 direct descendant families? Now, the powerhouses of the Will of Heaven in the clan were all seriously injured and lost their physical bodies. They were all recuperating in the Imperial Capital Mountain. He was the only powerhouse of the Will of Heaven left in the entire Tianqian city. If Qin Feiyang and the others really came, would he be able to stop them with his strength alone? There was no doubt at all. He couldn't stop them. So Dong Liming was now passing every moment in nervousness. He couldn't help but panic at the slightest movement. "You haven't rested yet?" A beautiful woman walked out of the attic and came to Dong Liming's side, gently rubbing Dong Liming's shoulder. "Madam, how can I sleep?" Dong Liming reached out and grabbed the woman's hand, his heart full of bitterness. How could a few people from a low-level civilization cause such trouble in the Divine Kingdom? The woman let out a weak sigh and comforted him. "Don't worry too much. Things will pass. You have to believe in His Majesty and the Central Dynasty. I hope it will pass soon so that we don't have to be on tenterhooks every day." Dong Liming shook his head and smiled bitterly. Ever since Qin Feiyang and the others broke into the Central Dynasty, the people of the top 10 direct descendant families had not been at ease for a single day. Because the top 10 direct descendant families were all close relatives of the ruler of the Divine Kingdom. In their opinion, Qin Feiyang and the others would definitely be the first to attack them when they entered the Central Dynasty. But fortunately, so far, Qin Feiyang and the others hadn't appeared. But this time, Dong Liming really couldn't stay calm, because the top 10 direct descendant families had taken the initiative to encircle Qin Feiyang and the others more than once. The first time was in Hanzhong City. The second time was in the 10,000 Demons Valley. There was a saying that one shouldn't do something more than 3 times. Even if Qin Feiyang and the others ignored them again, 2 encirclements in a row would definitely attract the attention of these people. "Okay, let's go and have a good rest. Maybe His Majesty has already thought of a way to deal with them when he wakes up." The woman smiled. "Okay." Dong Liming nodded and took a deep breath. He got up and walked out of the pavilion with the woman in his arms, towards the attic. But at this moment, the couple seemed to have sensed something and suddenly looked up at the sky. Under the moonlight, there were 10 figures standing in the sky. These 10 people were wearing black robes and ghost masks on their faces. It was impossible to tell whether they were men or women. There was no aura around them at all. Under the moonlight, they were like 10 ghosts. "Who are you?" The couple immediately turned pale with fright. Chapter 45-29. "We." A hoarse voice came out from under the mask, revealing a kind of ruthless coldness, like a devil from hell. Just said 2 words. Dong Liming and his wife had a premonition of uneasiness in their hearts. "We are your nightmares, and now we are coming to take your life." The hoarse voice smiled ferociously, raised old and dry, like a bone claw, waved hard in the void, and said coldly, "No one is left, kill." When the voice fell, the 9 ghost masked men behind him immediately broke out a terrifying momentum. Followed closely, the ultimate profound came out. Every ultimate profundity contained the will of the heavenly Tao. "Go to hell, repent." 9 people, like hungry wolves, rushed to the city below. With a wave of the hand, a large number of buildings were destroyed and thousands of people were killed in seconds. "Damn it! Why do you want to do this?" Could it be that you were sent by Qin Feiyang? Dong Liming roared. No comment. The hoarse voice, with a sinister smile. Bastard! Dong Liming roared. The ultimate profound appeared, and the will of heaven broke out, killing the ghost masked man in the sky. His strength was not weak. He had mastered the ultimate profound of 7 strongest laws. He was worthy of being the head of the direct family. However, the ghost masked man in the sky, his eyes were full of contempt. Clang. There was a loud noise. A black giant sickle appeared in front of the masked man. The giant sickle was 5 or 6 meters long, dark as ink and crescent-shaped. Every sawtooth on it was the size of a baby's palm, exuding a piercing edge. At the end of the handle of the giant sickle, there was a black skull inlaid, which looked particularly ferocious. This is, Dong Liming's face changed. The ghost masked man smiled, holding the giant sickle to kill. With a loud bang, the 7 ultimate profound containing the will of heaven were smashed on the spot. Peak level, master divine weapon. Dong Liming cried in disbelief, quickly looked at the woman next to him, and shouted, Madam Run, remember to report to His Majesty the Emperor. No one can escape. The ghost masked man grinned. The giant scythe in his hand flew out. Under the moonlight, it flickered with a terrifying light. Before the woman could run a few meters away, her entire body was split into 2 by the giant scythe. She died on the spot in an extremely tragic manner. Madam! Looking at the woman lying in a pool of blood, Dong Liming bared his teeth and roared madly. Don't blame us for being ruthless. This is the retribution that your Dong family deserves. Ghost head masked people smirk. The old man waved his hand, and the giant scythe attacked Dong Liming again. All of you deserve to die. All of you deserve to die. Dong Liming fiercely stares at the ghost head masked man. The ferocious look looks exceptionally frightening. You are the ones who deserve to die. The masked man roared. It was as if there was a blood feud between them. A murderous aura surged out of his body, rolling around him like waves of blood. The giant scythe was about to reach Dong Liming. Clang. Following an earth-shattering explosion, the entire Tianxian city began to tremble. Buildings collapsed crazily one by one. Cracks began to appear on the ground and spread in all directions. A terrifying aura burst out from the ground, as if some peerless godly object was about to break out from the ground. This is... The ghost head masked man stared at the broken ground. His pupils contracted. Boom. The next moment, a divine light swept out from the ground. It was a purple divine hammer. It was 3 meters long, and the whole body flashed with lightning. With the appearance of this purple divine hammer, the entire Tianxian city was instantly shrouded in a sea of thunder. Guardian divine weapon, Thunder God Hammer. The ghost head masked man whispered. Thunder God Hammer pierced through the sky, and instantly swept to the front of Dong Liming, facing the giant scythe. With a loud bang, the 2 divine weapons collided and broke out a wave of air. The entire Tianxian city was razed to the ground in an instant. Even the mountains outside the city were madly collapsing, like a picture of doomsday. Needless to say, the people in the city were all turned into ashes in an instant. The 9 ghost head masked men, who crazily massacred Tianxian city, were also thrown out, blood flowing from the corners of their mouths. But the most surprising thing was that this Thunder God Hammer could compete with the giant scythe. Moreover, it was not at a disadvantage. One must know, the giant scythe was a pinnacle sovereign divine weapon. To be able to compete with it, there was no doubt that this Thunder God Hammer was also a pinnacle sovereign divine weapon. You're all going to die. None of you can leave Tianxian city alive. Looking at the Tianxian city that was destroyed in an instant, looking at the people who died in an instant, Dong Liming's eyes gradually turned blood red. Immediately afterward, he grabbed the Thunder God Hammer, rushed into the sky, and killed the ghost head masked man. Thunder God Hammer. I didn't expect that after so many years, it is still guarding Tianxian city. But want to kill us, a fool's dream. The ghost head masked man grinned. The withered big hand, like an eagle claw, grabbed the giant scythe and immediately returned to the masked man's hand. The masked man grabbed the giant scythe and swooped down to meet Dong Liming. Clang. The 2 pinnacle sovereign divine weapons collided again. Suddenly, the sky fell and the earth cracked. Magma erupted. Great Protector, the movement is too big. It may have alarmed the Imperial Capital Mountain. Please don't fight and leave quickly. The 9 masked men who retreated to the distance shouted. The ghost head masked man frowned, stared at the almost crazy Dong Liming, and coldly snorted. You are lucky today. After that, he slashed out again, opened Dong Liming, turned around and opened the moment of time, and rushed toward the 9 people without looking back. The 9 people had already opened the space-time passage. Where are you going? Dong Liming was completely crazy and chased. Boom. Seeing this, the 9 masked men standing in the space-time passage opened their ultimate profound, shattered the void and the earth, and rushed toward Dong Liming. 9 masked men, a total of 54 ultimate profound. Dong Liming, who was holding the pinnacle sovereign divine weapon, did not put it in his eyes at all. He directly smashed the hammer, and the 54 ultimate profound were annihilated on the spot. But at the same time, 10 ghost head masked men rushed into the space-time passage one after another. Dong Liming crazily rushed over and smashed the space-time passage with his hammer, but it was still a step too late. The 10 people had been teleported away. Qin Feiyang, if I don't kill you, I swear I am not a man. Looking at the collapsed space-time passage, Dong Liming could not hide the grief and anger in his heart, and roared to the sky. What's going on? Where is Tianxian City? Where are the clansmen? Why is the patriarch left alone? What happened just now? Soon, several young people came back from the experience, and looked at the broken void land in front of them. They thought they had come to the wrong place. As a result, after careful confirmation, this was indeed Tianxian City. But why did it become like this? You guys go to the other 9 families immediately and tell them to be careful of Qin Feiyang. Dong Liming turned to look at the young people and shouted. Then he opened a space-time passage and left with the Thunder God hammer. Qin Feiyang? Is all this related to Qin Feiyang? Several young people were shocked. They did not dare to neglect and immediately rushed to the cities of the other 9 families. Imperial Capital Mountain. Dong Liming came with a murderous aura. Dong Liming, what are you doing? The guard at the entrance of Imperial Capital Mountain was shocked when he saw Dong Liming holding a peak-level Dominator divine weapon. I want to see the Emperor, Dong Liming said gloomily. Please allow me to go and report to them. The guard was very polite to Dong Liming, because Dong Liming was the Emperor's direct relative. My Tianxian City has been razed to the ground, and my clansmen have been killed. How can I wait for you to report? Dong Liming's eyes were red as he stepped into Imperial Capital Mountain and shouted, Your Majesty, Dong Liming has something to report. Please come and see me quickly. What? Tianxian City has been razed to the ground. My clansmen have been killed? What is going on? The guard was dumbfounded. Dong Liming's roar resounded throughout the entire Imperial Capital Mountain. The silence of the night was instantly broken. Dong Liming. Why did he come to Imperial Capital Mountain so late at night? The inner demons and Lu Jiajin also heard Dong Liming's voice. They walked out of the cave residence suspiciously and rushed toward the entrance. Soon, accompanied by the sound of something breaking through the air, the Emperor landed on top of the entrance. Looking at the sorrowful Dong Liming, his eyelids twitched as he asked, What happened? Your Majesty, Tianxian City is gone and so are my clansmen. Dong Liming could no longer hold back the pain in his heart. He collapsed on the ground and cried bitterly. What do you mean? The Emperor looked at him in shock. The guard beside him said, Your Majesty, he just said that Tianxian City has been razed to the ground, and his clansmen have been killed. What did you say? Accompanied by a cry of surprise, the inner demons and Lu Jiajin rushed over and landed beside the Emperor. Their faces were full of shock. Dongqing Yuan Kuanpeng and the Dragon God also came along. Dong Liming said so. I don't know if it's true or not. The guard looked at the inner demons and said. The group immediately looked at Dong Liming. It's true. Just now, 10 mysterious people wearing ghost masks came to Tianxian City. I wanted to ask them what they were doing here, but they didn't say anything and started to massacre the city. The entire Tianxian City, except for me and my clansmen who went out to train, were all killed. Dong Liming cried in grief. Ghost masked men. The inner demons and Lu Jiajin's eyes trembled. In their minds, they couldn't help but think of the two ghost masked men who suddenly ran out to attack them in the Myriad Demons Valley. They thought that the two were sent by Dong Qingyuan and Dong Hanzong to plot against them. As for the ghost mask on their faces, it was to hide their identity. But they didn't expect that they would massacre Tianxian City. It seems that, as you guessed, these ghost masked men belong to a third force. The inner demons said secretly. Lu Jiajin's eyes flickered. Which side did this third force belong to? Where were they hiding? Why didn't the Emperor and the others know anything about it? A moment later, the Emperor, Dong Qingyuan Kuanpeng, and the Dragon God finally recovered from the shock. Who are they? Did you see their true faces? The Emperor clenched his hands and stared at Dong Liming. No. But without thinking, they must be sent by Qin Feiyang to take revenge on us. And they have a peak-level Dominator divine weapon, Dong Liming said. Qin Feiyang. The Emperor was burning with anger. First it was the Sky Dragon mountain range, and now it was Tianxian City. Did he really think that the Central Dynasty was his backyard, and could do whatever he wanted? Chapter 45-30. Sigh. Looks like I've become a scapegoat. The inner demons sighed. There's no other way. Only they can take the blame. Lu Jiajin couldn't help but smile bitterly. That was true. Right now, no matter what happened in the Central Dynasty, the first thing everyone thought of was definitely Qin Feiyang's group. Your Majesty, Sky Dragon Mountain Range in Tianxian City might just be the beginning. The Dragon God suddenly spoke. The Emperor was shocked and quickly looked at Sky Dragon Mountain Range. You mean? Yes. The other 9 great clans may become their next target. The Dragon God nodded. The Emperor's heart sank. He looked at the inner demons and said, I'll use my origin energy to seal off Emperor Capital Mountain. Don't go anywhere and quickly rebuild your body. After that, the Emperor waved his hand and waves of origin energy surged out, forming a huge barrier that completely sealed off Emperor Capital Mountain. Liming, follow me to the 9 families. The Emperor looked at Dong Liming and said. Then he opened a space-time tunnel and left. Looking at the Emperor and Dong Liming's backs, the Dragon God, Dong Qingyuan and Kuanpeng frowned. Kuanpeng, you have to be careful too. The inner demons glanced at Kuanpeng and said. Qin Feiyang and the others might also take revenge on Kuanpeng Sea region. Kuanpeng heard and said. You don't have to worry about them. They might go anywhere, but they won't go to Kuanpeng Sea region. So confident? The inner demons was stunned. Because there are rules and restrictions in Kuanpeng Sea region. It's too troublesome for them. Kuanpeng sneered. I didn't expect you to know them so well. You even know that they are afraid of trouble. The inner demons was surprised. Kuanpeng didn't care about the inner demons anymore. He turned around and flew away. Dong Qingyuan and the Dragon God looked at each other and returned to their cultivation area without saying anything. Their top priority was to reconstruct their physical bodies. Otherwise, even if Qin Feiyang and the others appeared in front of them, they could only stare helplessly at them. The inner demon's eyes flashed and they transmitted their voice. Should we inform the main body? How? Although the divine sound transmission stone is still here, without a physical body, there's no way to revive it. Moreover, the imperial capital mountain has been sealed by the origin energy. It's very troublesome to leave now. So instead of worrying blindly, it's better to quickly reconstruct my physical body. We'll talk about it later. Tianxian City being massacred is such a huge matter. They will know about it sooner or later. Lu Jiajin whispered and led the inner demons away, leaving the guard alone at the entrance in a daze. First, they massacred the Sky Dragon mountain range. Now they massacred Tianxian City. These people were too terrifying. Most importantly, both incidents happened right after the battle in the Myriad Demons Valley. It had just ended, and now they had caused such an earth-shattering incident. Did these people not know what fatigue was? Then there was the Emperor and Dong Liming. They rushed to the 9 great clans in a hurry, but in the end, they did not see the ghost-masked man again. Presumably, These masked men had already expected that the emperor would go to the 9 great clans. Without any hesitation, the emperor used the origin energy to set up a defensive barrier for the 9 great clans. Because in the face of Qin Feiyang and the others, only the origin energy defensive barrier was effective. Qin Feiyang was also very innocent. Now he didn't even know about this matter, and he directly took the blame. The next morning, 5,000 years in a day, thousands of years had passed in the Black Tortoise world. Qin Feiyang's group continued on and on. Finally, they finished stripping all the ferocious beasts of their ultimate profound. Qin Feiyang and the others didn't care. The key was Longchen. This was a laborious work that consumed mental strength. If they didn't rest halfway, they would be exhausted to death. As for these beasts whose ultimate mysteries were deprived, there was no exception. Like the sea python demon emperor and the hundreds of demon kings in the Kuimping Sea region, they were temporarily suppressed in the soul-sealing valley. Old Qin, why don't you just kill them? Frenzy was puzzled. Why do you want to kill them? Wouldn't it be better to leave them behind to annoy the emperor? Before Qin Feiyang spoke, the white-eyed wolf grinned. Frenzy was stunned and speechless. You guys are really childish, but it's indeed interesting. Why don't we send them to the imperial capital mountain now? Now. Qin Feiyang was taken aback and shook his head. Not now. What do you mean? Frenzy was puzzled. If they didn't send them to the imperial capital mountain, how could they annoy the emperor? They all saw Dongqin with us, so if we let them out now, it won't be good news for Dongqin's family. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Dongqin, who was next to him, couldn't help but look at Qin Feiyang in surprise. He actually knew how to consider for her. Not touched. She was a little touched. Because Dong Hanzong had never been touched. Perhaps, following this group of people wasn't that bad. At least she could feel the care and concern now. You only know how to talk nonsense here. I have already counted. At this moment, Long Qin walked over and glared at Qin Feiyang and the others. She said, we obtain more than 400,000 ultimate profundities of supreme laws, and more than 1 million ultimate profundities of ordinary laws. More than 400,000? Qin Feiyang and the others were stunned. Even Dongqin had a shocked expression on her face. It was simply beyond imagination. More than 400,000 ultimate laws were enough to create 60,000 to 70,000 will of heaven powerhouses. Terrifying. In addition to Qin Feiyang and the others, the ultimate laws that they obtained in the past could probably form an army more terrifying than the Death God army. Not bad, not bad. We didn't come to the Central Dynasty in vain. Frenzy came back to his senses and laughed loudly. Qin Feiyang also smiled slightly. With a wave of his hand, the Fire Lotus appeared and all the ultimate laws were given to the Fire Lotus. Hee, little girl, you are now a real rich woman. The white-eyed wolf looked at the Fire Lotus and bared his teeth. Fire Lotus's mouth twitched and said speechlessly, you should say that I am a warehouse manager. You don't want to? Let me do it. I am very willing to be a warehouse manager. The white-eyed wolf hurriedly ran over to snatch the interspatial ring that contained the ultimate laws. To be able to hold so many ultimate laws every day, just thinking about it made him feel happy. Who says I don't want to? Let's talk about it later. Even if I want to, you have to ask Qin Dage if he wants to. Fire Lotus protected the interspatial ring. If she really gave these ultimate laws to the white-eyed wolf, the white-eyed wolf would probably become a child of wealth. These were the assets of the Black Tortoise world. She had to guard them well. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. He looked at the Fire Lotus and said, let Pai Lupi and Theta Wang use the time to train the disciples of the Sacred Hall. Don't worry. They have been working hard and have never slacked off. Fire Lotus smiled. Qin Feiyang nodded. With Fire Lotus, Pai Lupi, Theta Wang, Pei Hongyu, and Pei Dason helping him take care of everything, he really felt much more relaxed. Therefore, no matter how strong a person was, there was a limit. He had to have a few trustworthy and capable people to help him. Buzz. At this moment, the divine sound transmission stone rang. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He took out the divine sound transmission stone and looked down. It turned out to be Ji Xiaowu. As the divine sound transmission stone awakened, Ji Xiaowu's image appeared. Qin Dage, are you not at the city lord's mansion? Looking at Qin Feiyang and the others, Ji Xiaowu hurriedly asked. Because yesterday, when Qin Feiyang and the others left the city lord's mansion again, he was not present. Qin Feiyang and the others did not inform him, so he always thought that Qin Feiyang and the others were still cultivating in the backyard. No, what's wrong? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. In that case, you really went to the Sky Dragon Mountain Range in Tianxian City, Ji Xiaowu said. When he received the news, he still couldn't believe it at first. Qin Feiyang nodded. But then they couldn't help but be stunned and frowned. Tianxian City? Did we go to the Tianxian City? You are really amazing. In the blink of an eye, you have done such an earth-shattering thing. Ji Xiaowu's face was full of admiration. Suddenly he noticed Dongqin and said with a smile, Goddess is here too. Dongqin's cheeks blushed. She glanced at Qin Feiyang and the others and found that they were all looking at her with a strange expression. Her expression became even more unnatural. She coughed and looked at Ji Xiaowu asking, You just said that Tianxian City was also massacred? If you didn't do it, why are you asking me? Ji Xiaowu smiled. We didn't go to Tianxian City. Qin Feiyang shook his head. What? You didn't go? Then why is there news saying that you were the ones who massacred Tianxian City? Ji Xiaowu was shocked. He knew the character of Qin Feiyang and the others. They were all people who dared to take responsibility for their actions. Since Qin Feiyang personally said that they weren't the ones who did it, then it must be someone else. What's the situation? Tell us in detail. Frenzy frowned. They were already used to being the scapegoat. But such a big scapegoat, they still had to figure it out. Ji Xiaowu immediately told Qin Nan the information that he had heard. Although it was hearsay, it was almost no different from the real situation of Tianxian City being massacred by the ghost masked men. Ghost masked men. Heard it. Qin Feiyang and the others looked at each other, and their eyes suddenly flashed. It turned out that these people massacred Tianxian City. They were bold. Tianxian City was one of the top 10 super cities, and the people in the city were also the direct descendants of the Dong clan. They dared to blatantly massacre the city. It seems that they are indeed people who resist the central dynasty. Otherwise they would not do such a crazy thing. Long Chen whispered. Qin Feiyang nodded and said with a frown. However, their origins are truly puzzling. Massacring the direct descendants was tantamount to openly going against the central dynasty and the emperor. How much courage did it take? The most important thing was, now even the emperor did not know the origin of these people and thought that they did it. The identity of these people was like a mystery, and it was impossible to figure it out. You just said that Tianxian City has a peak-level Dominator divine weapon? White-Eyed Wolf looked at Ji Xiaowu, and his eyes were shining. I also just found out. It turns out that the top 10 super cities all have a Guardian divine weapon. These divine weapons are all peak-level Dominator divine weapons, and their duty is to protect the clans of the top 10 families. But they probably did not expect to encounter these terrifying ghost masked men. Ji Xiaowu sneered. There was no sympathy in his eyes but a gloating look. Guardian divine weapon. White-Eyed Wolf was speechless. Little Qinzi had predicted it again. But it was really tempting. If these 10 peak-level Dominator divine weapons were all in their hands, wouldn't the overall strength of the Black Tortoise realm soar a lot in an instant? Brother Wolf, I advise you to give up these unrealistic ideas as soon as possible. Ji Xiaowu looked at White-Eyed Wolf's expression and laughed. And White-Eyed Wolf looked at him suspiciously. It is said that now, not only the imperial capital mountain, but even the 9 super cities have been protected by the emperor with the power of the origin. Ji Xiaowu said. Damn it. White-Eyed Wolf was flustered and exasperated when he heard this. Protected by the power of the origin? Was it necessary? At least give him a chance. Suddenly, Mu Qing said, I think we can't take the blame for nothing. Qin Feiyang and the others were stunned and turned to look at Mu Qing. Mu Qing asked, Do you know what the 2 masked men who were looking for you in the Ice Valley yesterday looked like? Hearing this, a smile crept onto Qin Feiyang's face as he nodded. I know. Since you know what they look like, isn't it easy to find their nest? Mu Qing laughed. Hearing this, Frenzy and the others also showed bright smiles on their faces. Chapter 45-31. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and two phantoms, one old and one young, appeared. They were the blood-haired old man, and the young man who appeared in the ice valley. Mu Qing looked at the two of them, and immediately opened his all-seeing eye. However, after peeping for a while, Mu Qing's expression became quite strange. What's wrong? Qin Feiyang and the others looked at him suspiciously. Mu Qing said, they live in a deep mountain, but apart from the two of them, there is no third person. Only the two of them? Qin Feiyang frowned. This didn't make sense. After the massacre in Tianxian City, there were a total of 10 people with ghost masks. Logically speaking, this should be a well-disciplined and well-organized mysterious gang. Since it was a gang, there must be a base. How could there be only the two of them in the base? There is only one explanation. The place Mu Qing is looking at now may only be their private residence, not the base of this mysterious gang. Long Chen's eyes flickered. Qin Feiyang nodded, looked at Mu Qing and asked, do you know where it is? How would I know? Although I can spy on their whereabouts, I am not familiar with the Central Dynasty at all. I don't know that place. Mu Qing shook his head. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said, describe that place and let Dong Qin have a look. Mu Qing raised his hand and waved. In the void, a picture immediately appeared. In the picture, there were towering peaks, lush greenery, and surging rivers. Fierce beasts could be seen everywhere. Beside a river, there was a small old wooden building. It looked very simple and unadorned. In front of the wooden building, there was a small courtyard. An old man and a young man were sitting in the courtyard, drinking tea and chatting. They were wearing very simple clothes, and there was no strong aura, as if they were two ordinary people hidden in the mountains. Dong Qin glanced at the mountains in the picture, and after a while frowned and said, this mountain looks ordinary, and there are no obvious signs. There is no way to identify where it is. Heard. Qin Feiyang and the others couldn't help but frown. Don't worry. As long as they are in the Central Dynasty, I have a way to find them. Dong Qin comforted him, and took out the divine voice transmission stone. The group of people looked at her in confusion. Well, a moment passed. The divine sound transmission stone finally reacted. An illusory figure appeared. It was Dong Yulan. Qin Feiyang and the others consciously withdrew from Dong Yulan's line of sight. Dong Yulan looked at Dong Qin, her face full of joy. She asked with concern, have you been well during this period? I don't have to worry about food and clothing. It's pretty good. Dong Qin nodded. Looking at the radiant and cheerful Dong Qin, Dong Yulan's worried heart finally relaxed. She smiled and said, it's good that you're fine. What about you? What about your grandparents? Is everything all right? Dong Qin asked. We're all fine. You don't have to worry about us. Just take care of yourself outside. Dong Yulan said. I will. Dong Qin nodded and said with a smile. Dong Yulan looked around Dong Qin and suddenly asked, Qin Feiyang, Madman Mo, Golden-Winged Wolf King, they should be beside you right now. Ah. Dong Qin was stunned. How did her mother know? Qin Feiyang and the others looked at each other with a trace of surprise. Qin, or do you think your mother is stupid? You were able to come out of the Black Tortoise world unscathed and kill the relatives of the 9 great commanders in one night. How could there be no one helping you? Not long after, Long Chen appeared in a high profile, and killed the 9 great commanders at the imperial capital mountain, and destroyed Hanzhong City. All of this can't be a coincidence. Dong Yulan smiled. Dong Qin looked at her mother in a daze. She suddenly realized. The mother in front of her was much smarter than her overconfident father. Since you've said so much, Qin Feiyang and the others looked at each other and smiled, then walked to Dong Qin's side. As expected. Dong Yulan mumbled. Qin Feiyang, Madman Mo, Golden Wings Wolf King, Long Chen, Long Qin. There was also the ancestor fiend, Mu Tianyang Mu Qing, Li Feng Dong Jingyang. Although she did not know some of these people, she had heard of their deeds. just like the ancestor fiend's eyes of despair. Mu Tianyang's evil eyes. Mu Qing's all-seeing eyes. When Li Feng massacred the Sky Dragon Mountain Range, he activated his true puppet body. Originally, Dong Yulan was still very worried. After all, these people were not good people. But at this moment, looking at Qin Feiyang's group standing behind her daughter, she vaguely had an illusion that the people standing behind her daughter weren't a group of people, but a group of strong and powerful backers. Therefore, in her heart, not only did she not resist, she was very gratified. Perhaps these people were the best people for her daughter. Auntie, this is the first time we have officially met. I hope Auntie won't be too disgusted with us. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. You're too kind. Dong Yulan came back to her senses and quickly waved her hand. I have to thank you for not hurting my daughter. Even now you are helping me take care of her. Dong Qin is now our companion. Taking care of her is naturally our duty. Qin Feiyang smiled. Thank you. Dong Yulan was very touched. From this sentence, it was not difficult to understand that even if her daughter was in the Black Tortoise world and followed this group of people, she did not suffer the slightest grievance, because this group of people had already treated her daughter as their family. Mother, my situation. Dong Qin was still a little nervous. After all, no matter what, Qin Feiyang and the group were the enemies of the Central Dynasty. You don't have to worry. I have already discussed with your grandparents. No matter what you do, we will support you. One had to admit that Dong Yulan was really a loving mother. Thank you, mother. Dong Qin's heart ached and tears flowed uncontrollably. Silly child. We are your family. If we don't support you, who will we support? But when necessary, we will also make some decisions that you cannot accept. When the time comes, I hope that you can understand us. Dong Yulan said. I can understand. Dong Qin nodded, because she knew that no matter what decision her mother made, it was for the good of the people and her. Dong Yulan smiled and asked, why are you sending a message to mother now? Yes. I want to ask you to help us investigate a place. Long Qin turned the voice transmission stone and pointed it at the mountain range that Mu Qing had projected. Dong Yulan looked for a moment and frowned. This place is too ordinary. I'm afraid it will take some time to find this place. Are you in a hurry? Dong Qin did not answer and turned to Qin Feiyang. There is no hurry. Qin Feiyang shook his head. If there is no hurry, I can take my time. After all, the situation in the Central Dynasty is very chaotic now. If we make too big of a move, it might arouse suspicion. Dong Yulan said. Okay, then I'll leave it to you. But you have to tell your people not to act recklessly when they find this place, because the people hiding here are the murderers who massacred Tianxian City. They are extremely dangerous. Qin Feiyang reminded. Dong Yulan was slightly stunned and asked suspiciously, you didn't massacre Tianxian City? No. Qin Feiyang shook his head. If it's not you, why are there rumors everywhere saying that you did it? Dong Yulan frowned. Isn't this very normal? Now whenever something happens in the Central Dynasty, it will be linked to us. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. He was already used to it. It did not matter. Dong Yulan smiled bitterly and nodded. That's it then. Wait for my news. After saying that, she turned off the voice transmission stone. At this moment, she stood in a secret chamber and put away the voice transmission stone. After pondering for a while, she opened the stone door of the secret chamber. However, when she walked to the door, she could not help but be stunned. No. Her daughter was now with Qin Feiyang and the others. Logically speaking, a few years ago, when facing the plot of Dong Hanzong and Dong Qingyuan, it should be Qin Feiyang and the others who came to help her. But in the end, why would the person who came to help her be Lu Yuntian's brother? Her daughter, Qin Feiyang, Lu Yuntian, could it be? Dong Yulan's gaze trembled and her face could not help but turn pale. If it was really as she thought, then the secret hidden here was too terrifying. My daughter, this is not a joke. One wrong step, and you will end up with your body smashed to pieces. You must protect yourself well. Dong Yulan muttered and quickly left. She was a very tactful person. Even if she thought of it, she would not say it out loud. Because there were some things that could not be said. In the blink of an eye, more than a month had passed. During this period of time, Qin Feiyang and the others were wholeheartedly cultivating in the Black Tortoise realm. As the demon ancestor and Li Feng successively grasped the will of the heavenly Tao, the others such as Pei Tianhong, Wang Changyuan, Tang Hai, Zhao Tailai, and the others, also successively reached the final step of grasping the will of the heavenly Tao. The four great continents. A white-clothed woman descended in the sky above a village. This village looked very ordinary on the surface, but if you released your divine sense, you would discover that there was endless killing intent hidden here. Around the village, there was an invisible power of law. Once stepped in, even an expert with a sovereign divine weapon would die on the spot. On the ground of the village, there was also a time array, but these could not be seen with the naked eye. All one could see was a remote, quiet, and seemingly isolated small mountain village. At the entrance of the village, several old men gathered together to play chess. Second brother, it's not like this. How many times have I told you? You have to surround them like this to be able to take down the opponent's chess pieces. No. Do you know how to do it or not? It was really a principle that had never changed. No matter where, the people watching the chess game were always more anxious than the people playing the chess. Shut up. Are you guys playing chess or am I playing chess? So powerful? You guys do it. Ji Lauer glared at them. They kept chattering, and his eardrums were about to explode. Not far away, 5 old women squatted by the river and washed clothes. When they heard the quarrel, they couldn't help but look helpless. 50 or 60 meters up the river, there were 2 old men sitting together like ordinary old men. They each held a self-made fishing rod in their hands and were fishing. They were Boss Ji and Ninth Master Ji. They're typical. They're not good at chess, but they like to play chess. Ninth Master Ji looked at Ji Lauer and the others and shook his head with a smile. Don't be sarcastic. If it wasn't for that kid teaching you, would you be so good at chess? Boss Ji looked at him with disdain. Are you expressing your dissatisfaction in your heart? Why don't we have a match too? Ninth Master Ji turned his head and looked at Boss Ji provocatively. Do you think I don't dare? Boss Ji was full of fighting spirit, and was about to take out the chessboard. But suddenly, he seemed to have sensed something and looked up at the sky on the other side of the river. When he saw the woman in white standing in the void, his pupils immediately shrank. She was an expert. Even he felt threatened by an expert. Chapter 45-32. It's really a life that people yearn for. The woman stood in the air and looked at everything in the village, and a trace of a smile appeared in her eyes. Whoosh. Then, she stepped forward, stepping on air, and approached the village. Old Ji and the others who were arguing noticed the woman and looked at her suspiciously. Junior Ji Sui greets seniors. The woman landed on the other side of the river and bowed to the elders. That's right. She was the emperor's wife. But in front of old Ji and the others, she lowered herself and called herself a junior. It was obvious. The prestige of Boss Ji and the others was very high. Of course, it was also related to their age. They were all old fogies. Ji Sui was noble and powerful, but in front of the elders she was as young as a child. Ji Sui. Old Ji and the others put down their things and stood up to study the woman. That name sounded familiar. Suddenly, old Ji's eyes turned cold. His body emitted a sharp energy and he spoke in a low voice. So it's you, little girl. I didn't expect seniors to remember me. Ji Sui smiled. The elders gathered at the village entrance. They had no intention of inviting Ji Sui inside. Old Ji clenched his fists and said expressionlessly, "What are you doing here?" Ji Sui seemed to have expected this, so she didn't mind. She smiled and said, "I have come to pay you a visit." Come to pay us a visit? Haha. Little girl, do you think we're senile? Don't you know the imperial family's style? You don't visit without a reason. If you have something to say, just say it. Don't dawdle. Old Ji said. As long as one wasn't a fool, they would be able to hear the mockery in his words. Ji Sui wasn't angry. She smiled. There is something I would like to ask seniors for help with. When the group of elders heard this, Their hearts trembled. To come all the way from the Central Dynasty to the 4 continents and personally visit them, it was no small matter. Did it have something to do with Qin Feiyang and the others? Seniors, you must already know that Qin Feiyang and the others have entered the Central Dynasty, right? Ji Suyi did not beat around the bush and went straight to the point. What? They have already entered the Central Dynasty. The group of elders was shocked. But in his heart, he was thinking that this group of brats was indeed powerful. They actually managed to break into the Central Dynasty. You don't know? Ji Suyi was suspicious. I don't know. We're not familiar with them. We thought that they were hiding somewhere and cultivating in seclusion. I didn't expect them to have already entered the Central Dynasty. Our 4 great continents can finally have peace. That being said, I bet the Central Dynasty is quite lively right now. Ji Laoshi sneered. The schadenfreude in his words was completely undisguised. Ji Suyi forced a smile. This group of powerful old antiques really didn't give her any face. Fortunately, she had come in person. If she had sent someone else to the 4 great continents, wouldn't they have fallen out with these aggressive elders on the spot? Old woman, go prepare a table of good food and wine. These scourges have left the 4 great continents. We must celebrate. Ji Laoshi turned to the second young mistress and spoke in high spirits. He looked like an 80-year-old brat. Seniors, can you be a little more reserved? Ji Suyi smiled wryly and sighed at the elders. Whether it is the Central Dynasty or the 4 great continents, we are all part of the Divine Kingdom. But, before she could finish, the hot-tempered Ji Laoshi raged. You know we are part of the Divine Kingdom? If you know, why do you favor one over the other? Favor one over the other? Ji Suyi was shocked. Playing dumb? Over the years, what have we, the purple gold dragons, done for the Divine Kingdom? I'm sure you know that without me telling you. And the result? What have we gained? What you get is distrust and the role of cannon fodder. Look at the beasts and the Oceanids. What have they done for the Divine Kingdom? And yet they received the power of the origin. If the purple gold divine dragon race, the human race, and the god race could all obtain a wisp of origin power, would Qin Feiyang and the others be able to be so arrogant in our divine nation for so long? Ji Laoshi sneered. Mistrust? Cannon fodder? Ji Suyi was confused. Where did that come from? Dongqing Yuan, Neptune and the dragon god, said it himself. The Central Dynasty has always treated the purple gold dragons, humans and gods as cannon fodder. What? You still won't admit it? Ji Laoshi sneered. I see. You really can't do anything right. Ji Suyi grumbled. Saying something like that, wasn't that just adding to the chaos of the Divine Kingdom? It was no wonder the elders were so passive when it came to Qin Feiyang and the others. The reason for that was because they were already feeling dissatisfied. Ji Suyi took a deep breath and bowed. I apologize on their behalf, seniors. I can't accept it. Ji Laoshi snorted. Ji Suyi smiled helplessly. As for the power of the origin you speak of, I really didn't know anything about it. It was my father's decision, and I have no right to interfere. Her father was the ruler of the Divine Kingdom. Stop. Don't keep saying these pompous words. Hurry up and tell me your purpose. The group of old men were extremely impatient. This junior's purpose is simple. This junior hopes that you can follow this junior to the Central Dynasty and help kill Qin Feiyang and the others. Ji Suyi said. The elders exchanged glances. What? You want us to help in the Central Dynasty? Isn't the Central Dynasty filled with experts? They even have a terrifying army of death gods. How could such a powerful force not be able to deal with Qin Feiyang and the others? How much have they grown in the Central Dynasty all these years? It was truly an unbelievable topic. The Central Dynasty was so powerful, yet they were forced to come all the way to the 4 great continents to beg for their help. I don't know the details, but those brats sure are promising. Ji Laoshi snickered. Ji Laoshi asked, should we go to the Central Dynasty? No one spoke. They looked at Boss Ji and Master Jiu. Boss Ji and Master Jiu were silent as well. To be honest, before we came to the 4 great continents, we tried to encircle them. We mobilized all of the Central Dynasty's heavenly Dao experts. But in the end, not only were we unable to kill them, but the Central Dynasty suffered heavy losses. Even this junior's daughter would have died at their hands had it not been for this junior taking out my source energy to exchange with them. That's why I've specially come here to ask for your help, seniors. Ji Sui sighed. You're not joking, are you? All of the Central Dynasty's heavenly Dao experts couldn't kill them. The elders were shocked. This was beyond their wildest imaginations. Does this junior look like he's joking? Junior's words are all true. Qin Feiyang's group may be small in number, but each one of them is far stronger than us. Especially Qin Feiyang, Madman Emo, and Long Chen. The combat power they possess now is enough to destroy an entire army of death gods. Ji Sui sighed. When the group of elders heard this, their faces were filled with shock. They weren't acting, they were truly shocked. How long had it been since they entered the Central Dynasty? They'd grown so much in such a short time. They hadn't seen it with their own eyes, but judging from Ji Sui's expression, Qin Feiyang's group was a serious threat to the Central Dynasty. Seniors, please come with me to the Central Dynasty. Ji Sui took a deep breath and bowed. Boss Ji's eyes flashed. Old Jio, what do you think? Let's go. Of course. The future battlefield will be in the Central Dynasty. If we don't go, these kids will be alone in the Central Dynasty. They took the risk to invade the Central Dynasty for the safety of the three major races, and shifted the future battlefield to the Central Dynasty. You can say that. They're always thinking for us. If we just stand by and do nothing, wouldn't that be too heartless? Old Jio said. That's right. We can't let them fight alone in the Central Dynasty. We have to help them. Before we didn't have the chance or the ability to enter the Central Dynasty. But now the opportunity is right in front of us. How can we miss it? Old Jio said, his tone firm. All right. Boss Ji agreed. Since the battlefield was in the Central Dynasty, they'd go there and settle things with the Dong clan. But they couldn't agree so easily. They had to make the Central Dynasty pay. Boss Ji's eyes flashed as he looked at Ji Sui. We can go to the Central Dynasty, but we have 3 conditions. Ji Sui was overjoyed and said, Yes, please tell me. First, before we enter the Central Dynasty, you cannot interfere with our actions. In short, we must have absolute freedom and the right to choose. Boss Ji said. That's how it should be. Ji Sui nodded. Secondly, give us some source energy. After all, when the time comes, the people we will be facing are Qin Feiyang and the others. We definitely need to have some means to protect ourselves. Boss Ji said. When Ji Laosher and the others heard this, they all looked at Boss Ji with admiration. They could use this chance to gain some origin power, and use it against the Central Dynasty. This, Ji Sui hesitated, but nodded. All right, I'll give each of you a strand of origin power. As for the third condition, Boss Ji's eyes flashed with murderous intent. Feeling the murderous intent, Ji Sui's eyes twitched. She had a bad feeling about this. Chapter 45-33. At the same time, between the brows of Ji Lao, and the others, intense killing intent and hatred also crept up. Even Ninth Master Ji. Boss Ji said word by word. The third condition is that I want the lives of Dong Jinxiang, Dong Liming, and the others. I knew it. Ji Sui sighed. It was as she'd thought. Was there really no way to undo this knot? Old Master Ji said in a deep voice. You should know best why I want to kill them. I know. But it's been so long. Is there a need to keep harping on it? Ji Sui sighed. A blood feud can never be forgotten, no matter how long it's been. Yu Lao is dead. Although Yu Lao died at the hands of Qin Feiyang and the others, he deserved it. However, we must personally tear off the heads of the remaining people, and make them pay for the sins they committed in the past. Boss Ji's face twisted. She'd never seen him so ferocious. He was like a demon. Even Ji Sui felt a chill run down her spine. This condition. Ji Sui was silent for a while. She looked at Boss Ji and shook her head. I cannot agree. Haha. Boss Ji laughed. This answer was within his expectations. But it was also because of this that he felt so sad. No matter how much the purple gold dragons contributed to the divine kingdom, no matter how strong they couldn't compare to the Dong clan. Elder, I understand your feelings. However, this is not something that I can decide. How about this? Come with me to the Central Dynasty. When you see His Majesty, you can talk to him. I believe His Majesty will protect Dong Jinxiang and the others, and will compensate you. Ji Suyi looked at the old men with sincerity. Compensation? What do you think with our status and power can compensate us? Ultimate meaning? Dominator weapon? Do you think we care? Ji Laosher scoffed. The so-called compensation was simply a huge joke. But Ji Suyi looked troubled inside. Seniors, I really don't want to use force. So I hope you can give me some face. Still threatening us? Ji Laosher glared at him. No threat. However, if I am truly forced to such a state, this junior will have no choice but to resort to this. She shook her head. Even though the elders before her had 3,000 clones and harnessed the will of the heavens, they did not pose much of a threat to her. This was because the origin energy that she carried with her was enough to suppress a group of people. Ji Laosher was seething with anger. Did he really think that he could defeat them? But then, Jijiu stopped Ji Suyi and said, Fine, as you wish. We will go with you to the Central Dynasty and negotiate with the Emperor. Thank you, Lord Jiu. Ji Suyi smiled gratefully. We should also call the monarch, the divine king and the supreme. They will be of great help in this war. Up to you. Just let us know when you're leaving. Ji Laojiu said calmly. Understood. Then this junior will take his leave. Ji Suyi bowed, opened a space-time tunnel, and left satisfied. These elders were hard to deal with. But at least they weren't completely unreasonable. Brother Jiu, what are you thinking? This is such a good chance. Why don't you let them kill Dong Jinxiang and the others? Ji Laosher looked suspiciously at Ji Jiu. You're still young, don't be so impulsive. Dong Jinxiang and the others are direct descendants of the Dong clan. Do you think the Emperor and Ji Suyi will let us kill them? Ji Jiu shook his head. If they don't kill them, we won't go. Ji Laosher snorted. Won't go? If we don't go to the Central Dynasty, our Purple Gold Dragon clan will face extinction. Because Ji Suyi dared to come to the 4 great continents alone to find us. That means she's confident. Don't worry. Once we enter the Central Dynasty, even if the Emperor doesn't agree, we'll still have plenty of chances to kill Dong Jinxiang and the others. Ji Jiu smiled coldly. Old Jiu is right. We couldn't get revenge before, not because we weren't strong enough, but because we couldn't enter the Central Dynasty. But now things are different. As long as we successfully enter the Central Dynasty, killing Dong Jinxiang and the others will be a piece of cake. Boss Ji sneered. He was about to give up on the hatred in his heart. Because if they couldn't enter the Central Dynasty, it didn't matter how strong they were. The boundary between the Central Dynasty and the 4 great continents was an uncrossable chasm. But to their surprise, now the Emperor and his wife had taken the initiative to invite them to the Central Dynasty. This ignited the hatred buried in their hearts for a long time. At the same time, Central Dynasty, Qin Feiyang and the others hadn't returned to Green Wind City yet. A month in the outside world was 200,000 years in Black Tortoise World. Dong Qin was arranged to stay in a courtyard in the Devil's Land. She lived alone. It was quiet. Suddenly, the transmission stone rang, breaking the silence. Dong Qin took out the divine sound transmission stone and looked at it. A trace of anticipation crept up in her eyes. She immediately activated it. Dong Yulan's image appeared. Is there any news? Dong Qin asked. Dong Yulan teased. Why do you look more impatient than Qin Feiyang and the others? It seems that you have completely integrated into their team. Mother. Dong Qin blushed and couldn't help but pout. I'm really curious. What charm do they have to make you follow them so quickly? Dong Yulan was curious. No. Can you not laugh at me? I was forced. I had no choice but to follow them. Dong Qin said. Is that so? Why can't I see that you were forced? Dong Yulan looked at her teasingly. Dong Qin was at a loss for a moment. Okay. I won't tease you anymore. Since you've decided, then follow them well. Perhaps this will be a chance to change our fate. Although we became the #1 family in the Central Dynasty because of you, we're still no different from ants in the eyes of the top 10 families. Dong Yulan sighed and looked at Dong Qin. I've already found out about that place. It's called Black Tiger Mountain. It's located in a remote place in the southern part of the Central Dynasty. Black Tiger Mountain. Dong Qin murmured and asked, did we alert them? No. Dong Yulan smiled. All right. I'll inform Qin Feiyang and the others now. Dong Qin stood up immediately. Be careful. Also, don't show up unless you have no other choice. Dong Yulan reminded. I know. Dong Qin nodded and turned off the transmission stone. She walked out of the courtyard and headed for the ancient castle. Black Tiger Mountain. Its name originated from a black tiger. It was said that a black tiger with the will of the heavenly Tao was born here. It was extremely powerful, but it disappeared for unknown reasons and never appeared again. As for whether this rumor was true, there was no way to verify it. Anyway, the living beings in this area had always been wary of Black Tiger Mountain. Swoosh. Suddenly, a man and a woman descended in the sky above the edge of Black Tiger Mountain. The man was dressed in a white robe that was spotless. His 7-feet-tall body was tall and straight like an iron pine tree. His eyes were like the bright moon and stars, emitting an extraordinary aura. The woman was about 1.8 meters tall. She was also dressed in a snow-white robe. Her figure was exquisite and her black hair was like a waterfall. However, there was an exquisite mask on her face that prevented others from seeing her true appearance. They could only see a pair of dark and lively eyes. There was a cold glint in those eyes. They were Qin Feiyang and Dong Qin. This is Black Tiger Mountain. Dong Qin swept her gaze across the mountains and rivers in front of her. A terrifying killing intent was brewing in her body. Don't be so murderous. This time, we did not come to find them to kill them. Qin Feiyang consoled. Ever since the calamity in her family, this woman seemed to have turned into a demoness and was filled with hostility. They schemed against us and made us take the blame for them. Why aren't you killing them? Why didn't I realize that you're such a kind person? Dong Qin frowned. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly and shook his head. If they're really valuable, what's the harm in taking the blame? After saying that, he released his spirit sense and it surged in all directions. Soon it enveloped the entire Black Tiger Mountain. I've finally found you. Immediately, he muttered. Then, with a wave of his hand, he swept up Dong Qin and tore through the sky. By the river, an old man and a young man were in the room, cultivating. Suddenly, the two opened their eyes and looked out of the window. 2 rays of light burst out of their eyes, because they had already sensed Qin Feiyang's spirit sense. Sure enough, we can't escape their pursuit. The omniscient eye is truly a frightening existence. The blood-haired old man smiled bitterly. So what if they found us? The young man snorted coldly and didn't take it seriously at all. Seeing this, the blood-haired old man raised his eyebrows, looked at the young man and said in a deep voice, I'll tell you one more time. In the future, in front of Qin Feiyang and the others, you'd better put away your arrogance. Otherwise, even I can't protect you. The young man's expression stiffened. Although he was not convinced, in the end, he remained silent. Unconsciously, he also put away his arrogance. Obviously, in his heart he was still very afraid of Qin Feiyang and the others. Whoosh! Accompanied by the sound of breaking through the air, Qin Feiyang and the old man descended from the sky and scanned the mountains and rivers below. It was exactly the same as what Mu Qing had seen before. Seeing that the blood-haired old man and the young man did not appear, Qin Feiyang's eyes turned cold and said indifferently, Do you still need me to personally invite you out? Because in the room, he also sensed the aura of the two. I wouldn't dare. A hoarse laugh sounded. The blood-haired old man opened the door and led the young man out. His wrinkled face was full of smiles. And at this time, they were not wearing ghost masks. Chapter 45-34. Qin Feiyang looked at the young man with cold eyes. He looked at the blood-haired old man and frowned. Didn't I tell you not to let me see him again? You. The young man was furious. You came here uninvited. How can you blame me for being an eyesore? What kind of logic is this? The blood-haired old man was also speechless. How can there be such a domineering man? He came to someone else's house and said he didn't want to see him. If it weren't for the fact that the other party was the infamous Qin Feiyang, the two of them would have turned hostile on the spot. Qin Feiyang stepped out and landed in the yard. Dong Qin followed closely behind. Please sit down, the blood-haired old man hurriedly said. When Qin Feiyang entered the pavilion and sat at the stone table, the blood-haired old man turned to the young man and said in a low voice, Since he doesn't want to see you, you can go back to the house for the time being. As soon as these words came out, the young man was not only depressed, he was about to go crazy. Why? I'm one of the owners of this yard. How can a visitor drive the owner away? Isn't this a typical case of a guest usurping the host's position? Go. The big picture is more important. The blood-haired old man comforted him softly with a helpless look. If it were someone else, they would have turned hostile. But there was no other way. This man was Qin Feiyang. The name Qin Feiyang alone was enough to deter anyone. The young man had no choice but to turn around and go back to the house with anger. Brother Qin, are you satisfied now? The blood-haired old man sat opposite Qin Feiyang and laughed. I didn't say anything, Qin Feiyang said lightly. The blood-haired old man was stunned and said with a wry smile. Yes, you didn't say anything. I did it myself. Who is this person? Why is he so difficult to figure out? Who is this? Suddenly, the blood-haired old man looked at Dong Qin and looked at the mask on her face. His old eyes were full of doubts. The people I brought with me are of course my companions, Qin Feiyang said lightly. The blood-haired old man's mouth twitched. Wasn't this nonsense? If they weren't your companions, would you have brought them along? What I want to know is her name, identity, and origin. Are you playing dumb with me? Qin Feiyang said. Let's cut to the chase. You should know why I'm here. Objective? The blood-red clothed old man was dumbfounded. I think you're the one who's playing dumb. You massacred Tianxian City and shifted the blame to us. May I ask what is the meaning of this? A cold light flashed in Qin Feiyang's eyes. He looked like he was ready to attack at any moment. So it's because of this. The blood-haired old man suddenly smiled and shook his head. Brother Qin, you misunderstand. We have no intention of shifting the blame to you. It's the emperor's imagination that made you take the blame. This explanation is really reasonable, Qin Feiyang said with a fake smile on his face. The blood-haired old man smiled and said, Brother Qin, think about it. You're so strong, how would we dare to frame you? However, we need to keep our identities a secret, so we can't help you clarify. So, you're going to make me take the blame for you? A murderous intent flashed in Qin Feiyang's eyes. The blood-haired old man caught it and said helplessly, Brother Qin, please calm down. There's no other way. Moreover, we massacred Tianxian City because of you. Because of me? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Dong Qin was also puzzled. Massacring Tianxian City. How could it have anything to do with Qin Feiyang? When we talked about cooperation last time, Brother Qin didn't want to believe us, so we massacred Tianxian City to prove our sincerity, and also to help Brother Qin get rid of a hidden danger. After all, a family of the direct line of descent is still a threat to Brother Qin. The blood-haired old man laughed in a hoarse voice. Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched when he heard this. He finally understood what it meant to be thick-skinned. It was obvious that these people wanted to take the opportunity to get rid of the 10 direct line of descent families and weaken the central dynasty's power. However, they still said that they were helping them get rid of a hidden danger. It's true. The blood-haired old man nodded and smiled at Qin Feiyang. He was afraid that Qin Feiyang wouldn't believe him. Qin Feiyang suddenly stood up and looked at Dong Qin. Let's go. Okay. Dong Qin nodded. Go. The blood-haired old man was stunned and quickly stood up to stop Qin Feiyang. He asked in confusion, Brother Qin, we were just talking. Why do you want to leave? I hate people like you who think they're smart and treat others as fools. So, before I have the intention to kill you, get out of my way. Qin Feiyang didn't show any mercy and said angrily. Wasn't the blood-haired old man treating him like a fool? The cooperation. If it was when he had just entered the Central Dynasty, he would indeed need it. Because at that time, Long Chen's God's domain and the mad scientist's evil true body had not evolved. The demon ancestor, Mu Tianyang, Li Feng and the others had not mastered the will of heaven. But now, as for this so-called cooperation, it was completely dispensable. These ghost-masked men might even become his burden. Brother Qin, don't be angry. This is just a joke. If you don't like it, this old man promises that I won't make such a joke again. This time, the blood-haired old man panicked. You're still treating me like a fool. Whether it's a joke or not, do you think I can't tell? Qin Feiyang sneered. Don't. Okay. It's my fault. I apologize to you. Don't be angry. Let's talk nicely. The blood-haired old man finally realized what it meant to be too smart, and immediately took the initiative to apologize. Why don't we give him another chance? Dong Qin smiled faintly. You're right. Brother Qin, please be magnanimous and give this old man another chance. The blood-haired old man was also a person who knew how to climb up a pole. He immediately looked at Qin Feiyang and smiled flatteringly. Although Dong Qin covered her face, whether it was her voice, temperament or figure, all of them confirmed that she was a young and beautiful woman. Qin Feiyang looked at Dong Qin, and then at the blood-haired old man. After pondering for a long time, he said lightly, Okay, I'll give you another chance for her sake. Thank you. The blood-haired old man was grateful. Qin Feiyang returned to the stone bench and said, Although I've taken the blame for a lot of things, I don't have the obligation to help you take the blame. Tell me, how do you plan to solve this matter? The blood-haired old man sighed. It's definitely not possible for us to clarify, because then the emperor will know that there is a third party in the Central Dynasty. What does this have to do with me? Qin Feiyang asked. It's fine. The blood-haired old man hurriedly waved his hand and said with a smile, However, I hope Brother Qin can understand us. How about this? We'll give you appropriate compensation. Compensation? Qin Feiyang was stunned. This time, he was really interested. Now, even the inheritance of the ultimate law was just a number to him. What kind of treasure could this person take out to compensate him? The blood-haired old man hesitated for a long time before finally gritting his teeth and taking out the ultimate inheritance of the law of death. He reluctantly handed it to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang and Dong Qin were stunned. They had thought that the old man would take out an amazing treasure since he was so hesitant and reluctant, but he only took out an inheritance. This old man knows that with Brother Qin's foundation, you definitely won't be interested in an inheritance. But there's no other way. This is already the most precious divine item this old man can take out, the old man said. The blood-haired old man laughed dryly. The inheritance that was priceless in his eyes turned out to be nothing in the eyes of the other party. It was really a blow to him. Qin Feiyang glanced at the inheritance indifferently and shook his head. It seems that your foundation isn't that good. When the blood-haired old man heard this, he almost jumped up and cursed. Do you think we're like you who can casually deprive others of their ultimate laws? For us, the inheritance of an ultimate law is more valuable than our lives. Can you not be so discouraging? Leave us ordinary people alive. Not everyone is as perverted as you. I really don't care about this inheritance. I want to know more about your background. Last time you said that you want to go back and ask the higher-ups. How is it? Qin Feiyang asked indifferently. You don't even care about the inheritance of an ultimate law? It's really infuriating to compare yourself to others. The blood-haired old man sighed secretly. How could there be such a huge gap between people? Helpless. He put away the inheritance and looked at Qin Feiyang. The higher-ups haven't replied yet. They haven't recovered yet? It's already been more than a month. Is this your sincerity? I really don't feel it at all. Qin Feiyang's expression was full of ridicule. They didn't reveal their background and still wanted to cooperate with him? Wishful thinking. The blood-haired old man smiled. The higher-ups may have their own concerns. I'll urge them again. Tell them for me. I'll only give them 3 days. I won't wait for them after that. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he immediately got up and opened a space-time passage. The blood-haired old man also quickly got up to see him off. Just as Qin Feiyang was about to enter the space-time passage, he suddenly thought of something and turned to look at the blood-haired old man, asking, "This isn't your base, right?" "No." The blood-haired old man shook his head. "Then why are you hiding here?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. "We have no choice. Because you've already seen our true colors." The blood-haired old man smiled bitterly. "You're quite smart." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and turned to step into the space-time passage. Dong Qin followed with a trace of doubt. "Preposterous. This person is too arrogant." The young man walked out of the house and stared at the dissipating space-time passage with a furious expression. "He has the right to be arrogant. What can we do?" The blood-haired old man shook his head and smiled bitterly. Then he turned back to the house and set up a soundproof barrier. He took out a voice transmission divine stone and sent a message to the higher-ups. Chapter 45-35. What do you mean by that sentence just now? Why don't I understand? On the other side, Dong Qin looked at Qin Feiyang in confusion. What sentence? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. It's what he said about being helpless. What other true face did you see? Dong Qin said. So it's this sentence. Qin Feiyang nodded his head and smiled. Actually, it's very simple. If we don't see their true faces, we won't be able to use the heavenly eye to spy on their whereabouts. Similarly, they also expected that if we see their true faces, we will use the heavenly eye to spy on their whereabouts. That's why they have been staying in the Black Tiger Mountain and don't dare to return to their base. This is why they are so helpless. Hearing this explanation, Dong Qin suddenly understood. That's why I said that they are very smart. If the two of them really return to their base, then the place we are going to now is not the Black Tiger Mountain, but their lair. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. They are indeed very smart. As long as the two of them don't return to their base, no matter how heaven-defying the heavenly eye is, it will not be able to find their lair. Dong Qin nodded. Then, she frowned again and looked at Qin Feiyang. But this time we gain nothing. No. On the surface, we didn't get anything. But in reality, we have already given them a great sense of oppression. In the future, when facing us, not to mention anything else, they will definitely not dare to play tricks like today and treat us like 3-year-old children. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. It was equivalent to an invisible deterrence. It made the blood-haired old man and the young man clearly understand how terrifying they were. In the future, they would not dare to play tricks in front of them. Dong Qin nodded, it made sense, and asked, "Then what's next?" "Next?" Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and smiled. "You go to the Black Tortoise world to cultivate. I will go to the other 9 super cities to take a look. Give me the coordinates of the 9 super cities." After Dong Qin gave the coordinates, Qin Feiyang waved his hand and sent Dong Qin to the Black Tortoise world. Qin Feiyang changed his appearance. After pondering for a while, he opened a space-time tunnel and headed to Heavenly Sun City. Tianyang City was the territory of the 9th Direct Line clan. The family head's name was Dong Jinxiang. Although Heavenly Sun City was ranked higher than Profound Heaven City, their overall strength and scale weren't too far apart. The huge city was like an ancient giant beast that was hiding on the ground. Outside the city, there were undulating mountains and ferocious beasts everywhere. Among them, there was no lack of ferocious beasts that had grasped the ultimate profundity of ultimate laws. However, none of them dared to approach Tianyang City. 1,000 miles away from the city was the Forbidden Zone. Anyone who dared to approach would be killed without mercy. However, there were no restrictions on humans. However, it was extremely difficult to enter the city now. That was because the city was sealed by the origin energy. One had to go through an inspection by the city guards. Even if you have the coordinates of the city, you will not be able to teleport in. This was because once the origin energy was sealed, it could cut off all transmissions. Jianji. No matter how powerful you were, if you wanted to enter the city, you could only go through the various city gates. In the sky above the mountains outside the city, a space-time tunnel suddenly appeared. Then a person slowly walked out. This was a burly middle-aged man. There was a shocking scar on his face, making him look ferocious. He was Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang landed on a mountain peak and looked up at Heavenly Sun City. This was the first time he saw a super city of the Central Dynasty. He was really shocked. The scale was too big. Numerous buildings stood in the city like towering mountains, emitting a majestic aura. The four walls were like towering mountain ridges, exuding a cold aura. On the city wall, there was a guard every 3 steps and a sentry every 7 steps. The security was extremely tight. And even from far away, Qin Feiyang could feel the aura they exuded. They had all grasped the ultimate profundity. Experts with the ultimate profundity were used to guard the city. If this was in the Sky Cloud realm, people would definitely say that it was a waste of talent. But in the Central Dynasty, it was very common. This was the foundation of the Central Dynasty. Grasping the ultimate profundity would not allow one to stand at the top of the pyramid. One must grasp the will of the heavenly Tao. The will of the heavenly Tao was undoubtedly countless times more difficult. Qin Feiyang did not move. He stood on the mountain peak and silently looked at the city gate. There was a long line in front of the city gate. Everyone who entered and left the city had to go through strict inspection. It was useless even if you were from the city lord mansion. After observing for a while, he really could not find a chance to sneak into the city. Qin Feiyang raised his head and scanned the sky above the city. There was nothing in the sky above the city. But if he sensed carefully, he would feel a weak aura. This aura came from the origin energy. Not only was the origin energy barrier hidden, but even the aura was restrained. If he was careless, he might directly break in and crash into the origin energy barrier. The defense is so tight, Qin Feiyang murmured. A glint of light suddenly flashed in his eyes. Although Tianyang City was protected by the origin energy, he also had the origin energy in his hands. If he took out the origin energy, he would definitely be able to break the barrier of Tianyang City. However, after pondering for a while, he gave up on this idea. Because even if he could break the barrier of Tianyang City, some of the origin energy in his hands would definitely be used up. He did not have much origin energy in his hands to begin with, and could not use it casually. Every wisp of origin energy had to be used on the edge of the blade. If the heavenly Tao powerhouses in Tianyang City were all here, it would be worth it to use up some origin energy. After all, killing the heavenly Tao powerhouses here would be beneficial to the future situation. But now, these heavenly Tao powerhouses were rebuilding their bodies in Imperial Capital Mountain. Therefore, even if they broke the barrier, they would only kill ordinary clansmen. There was no need. Rebuilding their bodies. It's already been more than a month, they should be done rebuilding by now. Qin Feiyang's eyes flickered. He really wanted to kill his way to Imperial Capital Mountain now, and destroy everyone's divine soul. But in the end, reason prevailed over impulse. Originally, he wanted to enter the city to take a look, but now it seemed that there was no chance at all. Therefore, Qin Feiyang saw that there was no one around, and prepared to enter the Black Tortoise realm. But at this moment, at the gate of the city, a terrifying divine might emerged. This was the might of a divine beast. Soon, a divine beast Qilin walked out of the city, and appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Not to mention the fire Qilin. It was a snow Qilin. Its whole body was covered in ice and snow, and its bell-like eyes were bright and full of vigor. It looked quite handsome. Snow Qilin. Isn't this the mount of the young city lord? People murmured. Sure enough, on the back of the snow Qilin sat a purple-clothed young man. The young man was tall and straight, his long hair draped over his shoulders, and he was full of arrogance. Looking at the people standing in line in front of the city gate for inspection, his expression was full of disdain. Greetings, young city lord. Not only the guards in front of the city gate, but even the people in line also knelt down and saluted. Get up. Guard the city gate well. Don't let anyone suspicious go. The purple-clothed young man ordered. Yes. The 10 guards got up. The purple-clothed young man waved his hand, and the snow Qilin immediately soared into the air. However, at this moment, another old woman with white hair chased out and exclaimed, "Young city lord, where are you going? Stop." The purple-clothed young man looked back at the white-haired old woman and frowned. It seems that he is very unhappy with the old woman. "I say, Aunt Fong, can you not keep following me? I don't have any freedom." When the old woman flew over and blocked the way, the purple-clothed young man said angrily, "Do you think I want to follow you? If it weren't for the patriarch's order to keep an eye on you, I wouldn't have bothered to care about you. Where are you going?" The white-haired old woman also looked displeased. The purple-clothed young man smiled and said, "A few days ago, didn't I make an appointment with Ji Mingho and them to go sightseeing on 8 Immortals Mountain? Just now, Ji Mingho sent me a message saying that everyone is here except for me. I have to hurry over." "Nonsense. Now is the time to go sightseeing," the white-haired old woman immediately rebuked. "Just this once. Aunt Fong, just let me go. Everyone is waiting for me." The purple-clothed young man looked at the white-haired old woman pleadingly. "No." The white-haired old woman shook her head and looked down at the crowd below. She said with a voice transmission, "What if you meet Qin Feiyang and the others? With the strength of you little guys, you are not enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. How can there be so many what-ifs?" The purple-clothed young man was distressed. When he left just now, the old woman was still in seclusion. Why did she chase after him as soon as he left the city? It's better to be safe than sorry. This is a special time. You have to stop. Hurry up and go back with me. Otherwise, if your father finds out later, he will punish you to face the wall again. The old woman's attitude was very firm, and there was no room for negotiation. The purple-clothed young man was helpless. But suddenly, he looked at the city gate and his expression changed slightly. He called out, "Father." The old woman immediately turned her head, but she did not see the city lord of Tianyang City, Dong Jinxiang. Oh no. Immediately, she realized that she had been deceived. She looked back. Sure enough, the purple-clothed young man had already ridden the Shui Qilin and rushed towards the mountains and rivers in the distance without looking back. "You're really worrisome." The white-haired old woman scolded angrily, activated instant time, and chased after him at lightning speed. "Young city lord." Qin Feiyang looked at the back of the purple-clothed young man, and his eyes flickered. As the son of Tianyang City's city lord, he still has some value. How can there be so many what-ifs? Boy, you're still too young. In this world, the more impossible something is, the more likely it is to happen. Immediately, he activated concealment and quietly followed. "Aunt Fong, catch up with me if you have the ability?" The purple-clothed young man looked complacently at the white-haired old woman and laughed loudly, making the white-haired old woman's face become extremely unsightly. The divine beast Shui Qilin beneath him also grasped instant time, and its cultivation base was comparable to that of the white-haired old woman. Therefore, it was quite difficult for the white-haired old woman to catch up with him. However, he was completely oblivious to the fact that he had already been targeted by someone. Chapter 45-36. 8 Immortals Mountain. This is a very famous place in the Central Dynasty, and a place that many young people like to visit. Because 8 Immortals Mountain is a scenic spot. Located in the northwest of the Central Dynasty, it is quite vast and consists of 8 huge mountain ranges. Each mountain range has a different scenery. For example, the first mountain range has verdant trees, clear spring water, and rushing waterfalls. The mountain is filled with white mist, and the forest is a habitat for all kinds of animals. It is like a paradise on earth. The second mountain range is full of fire maple trees. The tall maple trees and the fiery red leaves dyed the whole mountain range red, looking like a cloud of fire floating between heaven and earth. The third mountain range is a glacier. Covered in white snow, countless small animals play in the ice and snow. The fourth mountain range, the fifth mountain range. In short, each mountain range has a different scenery, making people gasp in amazement. This is how 8 Immortals Mountain got its name. Faced with Shui Qilin, whose speed is comparable to hers, the white-haired old woman finally had no choice but to compromise and accompany the young man in purple to 8 Immortals Mountain. But they don't know. when they opened a space-time channel and went to 8 Immortals Mountain. A man who regards them as prey also entered the space-time channel silently. Soon, the 3 people landed in front of a clear lake. A few kilometers away from the lake, the lake ripples, reflecting the blue sky and white clouds. Looking up, they saw a verdant mountain sitting behind the lake. An ancient path winding up to the top of the mountain. On both sides of the path, there are all kinds of wild flowers, attracting bees and butterflies, and their fragrance assailing their nostrils. There are also many fruit trees. Red fruits, like honey peaches, exude a strong fruity fragrance. Just below the path, there is an uneven rock engraved with a few bold and vigorous characters. 8 Immortals Mountain, first mountain. Sure enough, it is surrounded by clouds and mist, with green mountains and clear waters, looking like a paradise. Young Master Dong, why did you come so late? We have been waiting for you for more than an hour. A displeased voice sounded. The young man in purple looked up and saw 8 young men and women standing on the grassland on the other side of the lake. Of the 8 people, the men are handsome and have extraordinary temperaments. The women have fair skin and beautiful looks, overflowing with a youthful aura. Sorry, I was delayed on the way. Young Master Dong smiled apologetically and took a step forward, crossing the lake and landing in front of the 8 people. The white-haired old woman followed suit. Ah, Aunt Fong? The 8 young men and women were stunned. They turned to look at young Master Dong and whispered, "What's wrong with you? Didn't we agree that only the few of us would come over to play? Why did you bring her here? There's nothing I can do. She caught me as soon as I left the city." Young Master Dong felt helpless. "What is it? Did my arrival affect your mood?" The white-haired old woman said angrily. No. The 8 of them hurriedly waved their hands and smiled awkwardly. "Say, you all truly know how to cause trouble. Why don't you take a look at the current situation and come to the 8 Immortals Mountain to play?" The white-haired old woman glared angrily at the group of little fellows in front of her. "Aunt Fong, actually, we're not here to have fun." One of the young women sighed. The white-haired old woman was stunned. Young Master Dong glanced at the young woman, then turned to the white-haired old woman and said, "Aunt Fong, it's actually like this. Since the massacre in Tianxian City, Dong Xiaofeng has been staying in the 8 Immortals Mountain and doesn't want to see anyone. So a few days ago, we discussed and decided to come and persuade him." "That's right. We have the best relationship with him. Maybe we can persuade him and let him go back," another young man said. "So that's how it is." The white-haired old woman nodded and sighed. "It's really hard for him to face such pain at such a young age. It's all because of that damn Qin Feiyang. If he hadn't massacred Tianxian City and made Dong Xiaofeng lose his beloved family, would things have turned out this way? When I become stronger in the future, I'll kill that bastard with my own hands." The group of young men and women were filled with anger. "He will. Evil people will suffer retribution sooner or later." The white-haired old woman nodded and asked, "Which mountain is Dong Xiaofeng at?" "He's at the top of the first mountain." Dong Yuanshao looked up at the top of the mountain and said, "Then let's go. I'll go with you." After saying that, the white-haired old woman led the group and flew towards the top of the mountain. "Dong Xiaofeng." Qin Feiyang murmured and transmitted his voice. "Dong Qin, do you know Dong Xiaofeng from Tianxian City?" "Dong Xiaofeng?" Dong Qin was cultivating. After pondering for a while, she nodded and said, "I know him. He's Dong Liming's son. It's said that his talent isn't that great, but he's a good person. He's very loyal and filial to his family. However, it's a little surprising that he didn't die in the hands of the ghost-masked man." "So that's how it is," Qin Feiyang murmured. Dong Liming's son. In other words, this person was now suffering from the pain of having his family destroyed. Then take a look at the background of the others. After Qin Feiyang said that, an image appeared in the void in front of Dong Qin. The image showed Dong Yuanshao's group. Dong Qin looked at the group of people with a stunned expression. "Why are you at 8 Immortal Mountain? Also, why did you meet them? Didn't they say that they were going to the 9 super cities? Why did they come to 8 Immortal Mountain to play?" As a native of the Central Dynasty, Dong Qin naturally knew about 8 Immortal Mountain. Moreover, she had been here many times in the past. It's purely a coincidence. Qin Feiyang smiled. Is there such a coincidence? Do you know that they are the treasures of the 10 great clans? Dong Qin said in disbelief. This guy's luck is too good. The treasures of the top 10 families? Qin Feiyang was stunned. It was somewhat unexpected. Yes. That Dong Yuanxiao is the son of Dong Jinxiang, the city lord of Tianyang City. And that Ji Mingho, he is the son of the head of the Ji family, and the cousin of Princess Yuxian. In short, they are either noblemen or daughters of rich families. Dong Qin said. It can't be. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He did not expect that these people's backgrounds were actually so big. Dong Qin said with a smirk. If you capture them, not to mention a few strands of origin source, even if there are dozens or hundreds of strands, the emperor will give it to you. Haha, Qin Feiyang secretly laughed. He really did not expect to meet such a group of noblemen and daughters. Very soon, Qin Feiyang followed the group of people to the top of the mountain. Standing at the top of the mountain, the scenery was even more beautiful. However, Dong Yuanxiao and the group did not seem to be in the mood to enjoy the beautiful scenery, and immediately scanned the surroundings. He's there. A young man in black spoke, and pointed to a big tree dozens of meters away on the left. This young man in black was Ji Mingho. Under the big tree, a young man in luxurious clothes leaned against the big tree and sat on the ground. There was a large pile of wine jars next to him, and he was also holding a wine jar in his hand. From the front, the young man had good facial features and was extraordinarily handsome. However, at this moment, his face was full of stubble and his eyes were listless. His hair was disheveled and he looked depressed. Dong Xiaofeng. A group of young men and women immediately surrounded him. When they saw Dong Xiaofeng's haggard appearance at this moment, their faces were full of worry. What are you guys doing here? Didn't I say that you guys are not allowed to come? I just want to be alone and calm down. Don't disturb me. Dong Xiaofeng glanced at the group of people and said weakly. You've become like this. Can we not come and see you? If this continues, I'm afraid that when the time comes, we can only come and collect your corpse. Cheer up. You can't do anything like this. The group of people tried their best to persuade and comfort him. My mother is dead, my brothers and sisters are all gone, and my entire family is gone. I might as well die. Dong Xiaofeng murmured. His face was full of a bitter smile. What nonsense are you talking about? Your mother is dead, but your father is still alive. Your clansmen are gone, but those elders in your clan who have mastered the will of heaven are still alive. It's just that their physical bodies have been destroyed. As long as they are still alive, your family will not disappear. Everything can be started again. Come back with us. Your father is very worried about you. Young Master Dong squatted in front of Dong Xiaofeng and comforted him. Go away. Don't bother me. However, Dong Xiaofeng did not appreciate it. He pushed young Master Dong away and said angrily, It's not your family that has been destroyed. Of course, you guys don't care. But before he finished speaking, the white-haired old woman could not stand it anymore. She stepped forward and slapped Dong Xiaofeng's face. Dong Xiaofeng was stunned by the slap. The wine jar in his hand fell to the ground and shattered. Aunt Fong. Young Master Dong and the others looked at the white-haired old woman in disbelief. They did not expect the old woman to slap Dong Xiaofeng. Do you really want to die? If you really want to die, this old woman will fulfill your wish. The white-haired old woman twisted Dong Xiaofeng's neck. Her eyes were cold and murderous. Aunt Fong, calm down. Young Master Dong panicked. Didn't she say that she was here to enlighten him? Why did she start to hit him? Facing the white-haired old woman's eyes, Dong Xiaofeng could not help but panic. It seems that you don't want to die either. Then pull yourself together. Who are you trying to show by acting like this? Are you worthy of being our Dong clan's son? My Dong clan's son, no matter how difficult the situation is, should stand up bravely and face it. Don't hide here and drown your sorrows like a coward. This is the behavior of a coward, do you know that? The white-haired old woman released Dong Xiaofeng. Dong Xiaofeng collapsed on the ground and closed his eyes. His face was filled with pain. Young Master Dong and the others looked at each other and could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. It turned out that she was just scaring Dong Xiaofeng. However, the old woman's words were indeed very encouraging. The blood in their bodies could not help but boil. Chapter 45-37. Yes. I can't go on like this, I want revenge. Dong Xiaofeng clenched his fists, the decadence between his brows swept away, and he finally regained his fighting spirit. Seeing this, Ji Mingho, young Master Dong, and the others couldn't help but smile at each other. The older generation had a way. In a few words, they convinced Dong Xiaofeng. Don't worry. Young Master Dong walked in front of Dong Xiaofeng, patted him hard on the shoulder, and said, Our 10 main families are connected by blood and flesh. Your enemy is our enemy, we will help you. Yes. Isn't it just a Qin Feiyang? When we grow up, killing him will be as easy as stepping on a dog. Ji Mingho smiled proudly. Domineering. The white-haired old woman looked at this scene with a smile in her eyes. That's right. Although their talent was not as good as the other party, their ambition and fighting spirit could not be lost. Isn't it just a Qin Feiyang? Hee. I'm afraid even your parents wouldn't dare to say such big words. Suddenly, a faint laughter sounded. And the white-haired old woman, young Master Dong, and the others were shocked and quickly turned their heads to look in the direction of the sound. But there was not even a shadow in the void in front of them. What's going on? What the hell? The group of people were bewildered. Who's playing tricks? The white-haired old woman realized that something was wrong, and her face suddenly sank as her divine sense rolled out. But, just as she released her divine sense, a figure suddenly appeared in the void that was originally empty. It was a burly man with a scar on his face. Who are you? The group of people immediately stared at Qin Feiyang in surprise. He could actually hide behind them without anyone noticing. Me. Qin Feiyang touched his chin, looked at the group of people, and said with a smile, I heard you say that when you grow up, killing Qin Feiyang will be as easy as stepping on a dog. Are you serious? It's none of your business. Do you know who we are? How dare you play tricks to scare us? You're courting death. Ji Mingho snorted coldly. Qin Feiyang looked at Ji Mingho and shook his head. Even your cousin, Princess Yuxian, wouldn't dare to say such a thing in front of me. You're really borrowing courage from the heavens. Hearing this, Ji Mingho's pupils constricted and his face was filled with bewilderment. He actually mentioned his cousin. Who was this person? Even my cousin doesn't dare to be impudent? Could it be an expert from the Imperial Capital Mountain? However, he was also very familiar with the experts of Imperial Capital Mountain. He had never seen this person before. Are you trying to scare me? Ji Mingho frowned. I hope that after I reveal my true face, you can still maintain this arrogant attitude. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. He took out a facial restoring pill and popped it into his mouth. This isn't his real face. The group of people immediately stared at Qin Feiyang's face. Gradually, a familiar feeling welled up in his heart. Their eyes were filled with doubt. Why did his facial features look more and more similar to Qin Feiyang's? It couldn't be such a coincidence. The white-haired old woman stared at Qin Feiyang's face, which was constantly changing, and her heart was already in her throat. It was really too similar. And as his facial features recovered, it became more and more similar. Finally, Qin Feiyang's true face was completely revealed. Boom! The group of people on the spot were like a bolt from the blue, and their minds rumbled. This face, this pair of eyes. Wasn't it Qin Feiyang? Why is this happening? How did we meet this person? Why is he in the 8 Immortal Mountain? Why? Looking at Qin Feiyang standing in front of them, the group of people was in extreme disbelief. How could it be so coincidental? This must be a dream. Ji Mingho rubbed his eyes hard and looked at Qin Feiyang again. This person was still the same person. The position was still the same. It was not a dream. It was really Qin Feiyang. In an instant, Ji Mingho was terrified. He actually said such arrogant words in front of Qin Feiyang himself. With Qin Feiyang's character, would he let him go? Fear. Despair. It instantly swept through his heart. His whole body couldn't help but tremble. Young Master Dong and the others were not much better. Like frightened chicks, their faces were deathly pale. This is too much of a coincidence. The white-haired old woman also murmured. For a moment, she simply couldn't accept this fact. When leaving Tianyang City, she was worried about this, so she had been persuading young Master Dong. Seeing that young Master Dong didn't listen and insisted on coming to the 8 Immortal Mountain, she couldn't help but have a fluke mentality. The Central Dynasty was so big. How could it be so coincidental to meet Qin Feiyang? Moreover, the battle in the Thousand Devil Valley had just ended, and any normal person would definitely stop for a while. But she never thought that there would be such a coincidence to bump into this terrifying existence as soon as she went out. Qin Feiyang. I will tear you apart to avenge my mother, my family, and my clansmen. Suddenly, a fierce roar sounded. The hatred in Dong Xiaofeng's heart finally overcame the fear in his heart. He activated the profound law and madly pounced towards Qin Feiyang. Dong Xiaofeng, don't. The white-haired old woman quivered and hurriedly shouted. However, how could the current Dong Xiaofeng listen? The moment he attacked Qin Feiyang, he had been completely blinded by hatred. You have guts. Qin Feiyang nodded and smiled. A person who didn't even master the profound law actually dared to attack him. A person who had mastered the will of the heavenly Tao. This courage was indeed worthy of praise. But it was also very stupid. Because a smart person would never do such an act of an ant trying to shake a tree. Boom. The profound law of death, the 18 levels of hell, was born. Without even activating the will of the heavenly Tao, Dong Xiaofeng's profound law shattered on the spot, and he was instantly blasted away by the terrifying death qi. Blood gushed out of his mouth. His entire body, like a meteorite, smashed into the mountain opposite. Boom. A huge hole was smashed in the mountain. Dong Xiaofeng. Young Master Dong and the others hurriedly turned their heads to look at the mountain opposite, their faces full of worry. What a powerful strength. He had only activated one profound law, and Dong Xiaofeng was unable to fight back. In comparison, the white-haired old woman appeared to be much calmer. While staring at Qin Feiyang, she silently took out the divine sound transmission stone, wanting to call for reinforcements. No need to hide. I allow you to send a message to your city lord. Qin Feiyang looked at the white-haired old woman and smiled faintly. What? The white-haired old woman looked at Qin Feiyang in astonishment. Seeing that she had been discovered by Qin Feiyang, she was extremely nervous at first. But she never expected that the other party would take the initiative to let her send a message for help. What was he trying to do? Looking at the motionless and terrified white-haired old woman, Qin Feiyang said unhappily, I asked you to send a message for help. Why don't you dare? How would the white-haired old woman dare to move? Because she thought that Qin Feiyang was playing with her. If she really sent a message for help, she was afraid that he would kill her immediately. Qin Feiyang, you inhumane beast, I swear, if I don't kill you, I'm not a human. A roar. Dong Xiaofeng rushed out covered in blood, his face covered in dust. His whole body was full of hostility, as if he was not afraid of Qin Feiyang's strength. Once again, he crazily attacked Qin Feiyang. Inhumane. Compared to the harm that your divine kingdom has done to the Sky Cloud realm, I think that what I'm doing now is already very merciful. Qin Feiyang said faintly. With a wave of his hand, the law of death's ultimate law broke through the air with a boom. Don't kill him. He was just impulsive and lost his mind. Young Master Dong and the others cried out. However, Qin Feiyang turned a deaf ear. Dong Xiaofeng quickly dodged. Ji Mingho roared. Dong Xiaofeng's eyes were red, and there was only Qin Feiyang in his eyes. It was as if he didn't hear Ji Mingho's roar. He was about to die under the law of death's ultimate law. Accompanied by a loud clanging sound, a set of armor suddenly appeared on Dong Xiaofeng's body. The entire body flickered with golden light, exuding a monstrous aura. Sovereign divine weapon? Qin Feiyang was taken aback. It was still an armor. Sure enough, he was worthy of being the son of a direct descendant. At such a young age, He already had a sovereign divine weapon protecting him. If it was in the sky cloud realm, it could only be described as extravagant. However, this was just a low-level sovereign divine weapon. A low-level sovereign divine weapon. If Qin Feiyang hadn't comprehended the ultimate law of death, he would still be somewhat afraid. Just like before, when fighting with the dragons, the Feng people and the Kirin clan, the sovereign divine weapon was an invincible existence. But now, not to mention the low level, even if it was a legendary level, he could easily crush it. Boom. The ultimate law of the 7 ultimate laws, dual will of heaven activated. Divine power rolled in all directions. The picturesque 8 immortal mountain, accompanied by a series of rumbling sounds, was razed to the ground on the spot. Dong Xiaofeng, Ji Mingho and the others cried out in grief. It was also at this moment. The white-haired old woman could no longer hold back the fear in her heart, and hurriedly activated the sound transmission god stone. Dual wills of the heavenly Tao and the ultimate profundities of the 7 ultimate laws. Even if she, Ji Mingho, and the others worked together and used all their skills, they still wouldn't be enough to fill the gaps between Qin Feiyang's teeth. There was no suspense. With a crisp crack, the armor on Dong Xiaofeng's body shattered. This also meant that another sovereign divine weapon was destroyed. This was Qin Feiyang's mentality at this time. A low-level sovereign divine weapon was just a slightly more powerful divine weapon. It didn't have much value at all, and was dispensable. As the armor shattered, Dong Xiaofeng's entire body was torn apart on the spot. Blood dyed the sky red. Son of a bitch, don't go too far. Young Master Dong and the others roared. They also activated their ultimate laws and attacked Qin Feiyang crazily. You still have the courage to resist. It seems that you are still different from the ordinary playboys. At least, your guts are still there. Qin Feiyang nodded approvingly. But the reality was so cruel. Guts alone wasn't enough. They also needed powerful strength to rely on. This group of nobles in front of him obviously didn't have such strength. However, if they were given enough time, they would definitely have great achievements in the future. With a wave of his hand, an ultimate profundity of the laws of destruction appeared and crushed out with devastating force. However, it did not kill the group of people. Instead, it paused in the air above the group of people. Puff. The oppressive force of the ultimate law firmly imprisoned the group of people, causing blood to gush out of their mouths. Chapter 45-38. Qin Feiyang did not kill Dong Xiaofeng and kept his divine spirit. However, even though Dong Xiaofeng was only left with his divine spirit, he was still extremely crazy and desperately pounced on Qin Feiyang. Hatred is really something that scares people. Qin Feiyang shook his head and sighed. He suppressed Dong Xiaofeng and said indifferently, "The death of your clansmen has nothing to do with me." Nothing to do with you? Are you kidding me? Everyone knows that you bathed Tianxian City in blood. Why? You dare to do it but don't dare to admit it? Dong Xiaofeng roared hysterically. Qin Feiyang frowned. What was there to explain to this person? So what if he really bathed Tianxian City in blood? Buzz. At this time, the voice transmission stone in the white-haired old woman's hand finally reacted. A middle-aged fatso wearing a golden coat with a round body appeared. This person was Dong Jinxiang, the city lord of Tianyang City, the patriarch of the 9th lineage family. Like Dong Liming, he was also a will of heaven expert. What are you doing? Don't you know that I'm assisting His Majesty in tracking the whereabouts of Qin Feiyang and the others? Dong Jinxiang looked at the white-haired old woman and reprimanded angrily. Tracking my whereabouts? It's been hard on you. Qin Feiyang chuckled. Who's talking? Dong Jinxiang was shocked. The white-haired old woman smiled bitterly and looked at Dong Jinxiang. Patriarch, Qin Feiyang is standing in front of me. What? Dong Jinxiang's expression changed greatly. The white-haired old woman turned the voice transmission stone and faced Qin Feiyang, and the imprisoned Dong Xiaofeng and the others. Qin Feiyang. It's really you. Dong Jinxiang roared, a cold light flashing in his eyes. Father, save me. Young Master Dong's cry also sounded. Dong Jinxiang was stunned. Wasn't this his son's voice? He quickly looked in the direction of the voice. When he saw young Master Dong and the others imprisoned not far away, his expression changed. What's going on? Why did these little fellows fall into the hands of Qin Feiyang? Dong Tianfang, what are you doing? Didn't I tell you to keep an eye on this unfilial son? Why did you let him leave Tianyang City? When he regained his senses, Dong Jinxiang couldn't help but let out a roar, his anger overflowing to the heavens. Patriarch, I tried to stop the young city lord, but he wouldn't listen. What can I do? The white-haired old woman had a bitter expression. If not for protecting young Master Dong, she would not have wanted to leave the city at all. This was because Heavenly Sun City was protected by the power of origin. As long as he hid in Heavenly Sun City, even if Qin Feiyang attacked Heavenly Sun City, he would not be able to enter the city. If he doesn't listen, break his legs. Dong Jinxiang roared. The white-haired old woman felt helpless. If she really broke young Master Dong's legs, she was afraid that he would look for her to settle the score. Why was it so difficult to be a human? Even Qin Feiyang couldn't help but sympathize with this old woman. This was because he had personally witnessed how young Master Dong had left Heavenly Sun City. The old woman was a victim who had been forced into a corner. Father, can you not talk about this first? Quickly save us. Young Master Dong cried for help in despair. If he had known this would happen, he would have listened to the old woman and obediently stayed in the city. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in this world. It was too late to say anything. Shut up. Dong Jinxiang glared at young Master Dong. He had repeatedly warned him not to leave Heavenly Sun City during this period, but he just wouldn't listen. Now you know fear? His gaze turned to Qin Feiyang and said in a deep voice, What do you want? Nothing. I just want you to convey a message to the Emperor for me. If you want the lives of Dong Xiaofeng and the others, then take out something that can satisfy me in exchange. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. What can satisfy you? The ultimate profound inheritance. Dong Jinxiang's face was as dark as water. As the patriarch of a direct descendant family, he could still take out a few ultimate profound inheritances. Ultimate profound inheritance? Are you trying to dismiss a beggar? I only need one thing, origin energy. One life, 10,000 strands of origin energy. Don't try to play tricks. You can't beat me. Prepare your origin energy and contact me again. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he asked the white-haired old woman to turn off the voice transmission stone. Wait. Dong Jinxiang hurriedly stopped him and said anxiously, One life, 10,000 strands of origin energy, you are too ridiculous. That will depend on the Emperor's heart whether these descendants of the Dong clan are worth 10,000 strands of origin energy. Qin Feiyang faintly smiled and looked at the white-haired old woman. His gaze was very calm, but the white-haired old woman felt a hair-raising sense of crisis. She ignored Dong Jinxiang's attempts to stop her and hurriedly closed the divine sound transmission stone. It was only now that she finally understood that Qin Feiyang came for the origin energy. Next, the white-haired old woman was very nervous. Dong Xiaofeng and the others' lives were of course valuable, but her life was worthless. Would Qin Feiyang let her live? She looked at Qin Feiyang again. After looking at the white-haired old woman for a moment, he suddenly smiled and said, You can go. Huh. The white-haired old woman was stunned. Go. Did she hear it wrong? He actually let her go. You don't even have the value of one strand of origin energy. Why should I let you live? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. The white-haired old woman smiled bitterly. True enough. She was not worth a single cent. However, according to this person's means and character, shouldn't he kill people who were worthless? Why did he let her go? Could it be that in this person's eyes, she was not even worth killing? At the thought of this, she could not help but smile bitterly. People with low status and weak strength indeed had no dignity, and did not even have the right to be killed. Sigh. This was fate. But fortunately, she managed to keep her life. You're on your own. Out of gratitude to Qin Feiyang, the white-haired old woman kindly advised him, and turned to leave at lightning speed. It's not me who's on my own, Qin Feiyang murmured. Although he let the white-haired old woman go, whether she was alive or dead was still unknown. Because, When the white-haired old woman returned to Tianyang City, Dong Jinxiang would definitely question her. Why was she able to return alive? He might even think that she was able to keep her life because she betrayed the central dynasty. So, if the white-haired old woman was smart enough, she would not return to Tianyang City. Retracting his gaze, Qin Feiyang turned to glance at Dong Xiaofeng's group and said with a faint smile, "Don't worry, I won't kill you. After all, without you this deal cannot be done." After saying that, Qin Feiyang waved his hand and suppressed the group of 10 people in a cultivation room in the ancient castle. Dong Xiaofeng had a sovereign divine weapon and Dong Yuanshao's group of 9 might also have one. But he did not take it to heart. A mere low-level sovereign divine weapon, even if they were given 100 guts, they would not dare to act rashly in the Black Tortoise realm. It's a pity that I haven't had the time to appreciate this 8 immortal mountain. Glancing at the surrounding broken mountains and rivers, Qin Feiyang opened a space-time tunnel and left without looking back. What? Imperial Capital Mountain. The emperor sat in the newly built imperial palace and looked at Dong Jinxiang, who was kneeling before him with an ashen face. "Your Majesty, they are all direct descendants of our Dong clan. You must save them." Dong Jinxiang knelt on the ground and cried out with a look of despair. "One life, 10,000 strands of origin energy. How do you want me to save them?" The emperor roared. He was already in a terrible fix, and now this was happening. Wasn't this adding to his troubles? Dong Jinxiang's eyes trembled. "Your Majesty," at this time, another group of people rushed in. Among them was Dong Liming. They were the patriarchs of the other 9 direct descendants. "Your Majesty, is this true? Don't scare us." The 9 of them looked at the emperor hesitantly. The emperor sighed and nodded. "It's true." "Damn it. Why did this happen?" "Dong Liming, it's all your fault." The patriarchs of the 8 direct descendants suddenly pointed their spears at Dong Liming. "What does it have to do with me?" Dong Liming said angrily. "Before coming, I have already asked the people in the clan. They said that my son Ji Mingho went to 8 Immortal Mountain to persuade your son, Dong Xiaofeng. If not for this, would they fall into the hands of Qin Feiyang? You still say that this has nothing to do with you." One of the middle-aged men stared at Dong Liming angrily. Dong Liming clenched his hands. Although he was angry in his heart, he was powerless to refute. Because this was the truth. "You must give us an explanation. Let me tell you, if anything happens to my daughter, I will not let you go." The more the group of people spoke, the angrier they became, pointing at Dong Liming's nose and scolding. "Enough! Isn't it chaotic enough?" The emperor roared angrily. The patriarchs of the direct descendants acted like a group of shrews. Where was this? "Your Majesty." The group of people looked at the emperor, their eyes full of anxiety. "This matter can't be blamed on Dong Xiaofeng, let alone Dong Liming. On the contrary, you should feel gratified because they went to persuade Dong Xiaofeng, indicating that they are loyal." The emperor said in a deep voice. "What's the use of loyalty?" Dong Jinxiang snorted coldly. The other patriarchs were also disdainful. If not for this so-called loyalty, would their children fall into the hands of Qin Feiyang? "Don't worry. I will think of a way." The emperor comforted them. The people here were his close relatives. Sometimes even he had to put up with them. "What does Qin Feiyang want?" Dong Liming asked. "One life, 10,000 strands of origin force." The emperor shook his head and sighed. This was really an exorbitant demand. 1 life, 10,000 strands of origin force. 10 lives, that would be 100,000 strands of origin force. This number, even he couldn't help but feel his scalp tingle. Because once he really gave it to Qin Feiyang's strength would skyrocket by a lot. And by then, it would be more and more difficult to deal with. And in the myriad Demons Valley, in order to save his daughter, Qin Feiyang had already obtained a large amount of origin force from his wife. The situation was getting worse for the central dynasty. When Dong Liming and the others heard Qin Feiyang's conditions, they were all dumbfounded. Origin force, this was the ultimate means of the divine kingdom. Even the top 10 direct descendants were not qualified to touch it, not even 1 strand. But now, This little bastard asked for 100,000 strands of origin force. Wasn't he afraid of dying from overeating? Chapter 4539. Your Majesty, we can't give you 100,000 strands of origin energy. Suddenly, a voice sounded from outside. Immediately, an old figure entered the imperial palace. This person was Dong Qingyuan. Dong Qingyuan, what do you mean? Dong Liming and the others immediately looked at Dong Qingyuan, their eyes full of anger. Dong Qingyuan ignored them and walked to the center of the hall. He looked at the emperor sitting above and bowed. Your Majesty, I know that you value the relationship with the 10 lineal families very much, but this is a serious matter. You must not act impulsively. Dong Qingyuan, what did you say? Say it again if you dare. Dong Jinxiang shouted angrily. Dong Qingyuan turned to look at Dong Jinxiang and said in a deep voice, I know that you love your son very much. To be honest, I also like young Master Dong very much, but this is really not a trivial matter. Dong Jinxiang stared at Dong Qingyuan without saying a word, his eyes extremely gloomy. Dong Qingyuan did not continue to target Dong Jinxiang. He glanced at everyone and said, Patriarchs, what advantages do we have in the battle against Qin Feiyang and the others? Advantages? The 10 of them were silent. If you don't say it, then I will. At first, our central dynasty had a lot of advantages. Whether it's the 10 lineal families, our Death God army, the monster king of the Kunpeng Sea area, or the divine king of the Sky Dragon Mountain range, they all posed a huge threat to Qin Feiyang and the others. However, because we underestimated them and did not use all our strength to destroy them at the first moment, giving them a chance to grow. Until now, we have no advantage in the face of them. This can be seen from the battle in the Myriad Demons Valley. Dong Qingyuan said. As soon as these words came out, not only the 10 patriarchs, but even the emperor fell silent. What Dong Qingyuan said was indeed an indisputable fact. Is our central dynasty really not at an advantage now? No, in fact there is. Our current advantage is still the origin energy. However, the only advantage left is the origin energy. In other words, right now the only thing that can suppress Qin Feiyang and the others is the power of the origin of our divine kingdom. Dong Qingyuan sighed. Such a powerful central dynasty could not do anything to a group of people from a low-leveled civilization. Furthermore, they were a group of inexperienced youths. How sad and ridiculous was this? We all know that. But 100,000 strands of origin energy shouldn't affect the overall situation, right? Dong Jinxiang frowned. It won't affect the overall situation? Then let me ask you, do you know how much origin energy His Majesty and the Empress have left? Let me ask you again. Can His Majesty and Her Highness enter the land of origin and use the power of origin at will? No. The origin energy in their hands was bestowed upon them by the Lord Sovereign. Every time I use one, I'll have one less. Dong Qingyuan shouted. Facing the current situation, he really couldn't understand why Dong Jinxiang dared to say that it wouldn't affect the overall situation. Dong Jinxiang's expression froze. He looked up at the emperor and said, Your Majesty, can you tell us how much power of origin you and your wife have? The emperor was a little hesitant. What's wrong? You don't even trust us, your family? Dong Jinxiang frowned. No. The emperor shook his head. Don't force His Majesty. His Majesty didn't say anything because he didn't want you to worry. Because if he tells the truth and there isn't much power of origin left, how will you have the courage to face Qin Feiyang in the future? I'm afraid that as long as you see him, you'll panic. Dong Qingyuan's words were not polite at all. But it was also the truth. The reason why these people from the direct family were still so confident was because of the power of origin. In their eyes, as long as there was power of origin, the central dynasty was invincible. No one could threaten their status and lives. Actually, I don't know how much power of origin His Majesty and the Empress have. But as a member of the central dynasty, in the face of the current situation, you must understand one thing. Save as much power of origin as possible. During this period of time, in order to kill Qin Feiyang and the others, to protect the imperial capital mountain, and to protect the clans of the direct family. His Majesty and the Empress have already used up a lot of power of origin. Especially in the several confrontations between His Majesty and Qin Batian, they have lost tens of thousands of power of origin. And back then, in order to save the princess, the Empress also gave Qin Feiyang a lot of power of origin. If we give Qin Feiyang another 100,000 power of origin now, it may directly threaten the foundation of the central dynasty. So, I implore all the family heads to consider the big picture. After saying that, Dong Qingyuan lowered his posture and bowed to the 10 family heads. The 10 family heads remained silent. To put it bluntly, they asked for it. They have a shelter. Why did they go to the 8 Immortal Mountain? Since they are willful, they have to bear the consequences of their willfulness. Besides, aren't they just a few children? Family heads, you are strong. If they are gone, you can just have a few more. Why help Qin Feiyang to save them and harm ourselves? Seeing that the 10 family heads were silent, Dong Qingyuan became angry and scolded mercilessly. As for the emperor, although he had been silent, in the face of Dong Qingyuan's sharp words, he couldn't help but look at him with gratitude, because these words were exactly what he wanted to say, but didn't dare to say. Although he was the emperor of the central dynasty, the elders of the 10 families were basically his elders. Among them, even the brothers of the dominator of the divine kingdom. They were his father's brothers. So, in the face of the 10 families, sometimes he, the emperor, felt helpless. He couldn't beat them or scold them. If he really beat them up, they might go to the dominator of the divine kingdom and complain. In the end, he, the emperor, would be the one to be scolded. Since we have already said this, we have nothing to say. Why don't we go to the elders and ask for their opinions? Dong Jinxiang suddenly looked at the emperor and said. The so-called old men referred to the elders of the 10 great direct descendant clans. This, the emperor's eyelids twitched. He looked at the 10 and said, the elders are all rebuilding their bodies. It's better not to let them know about this, lest they get angry. Then what do you think we should do? Don't always let Dong Qingyuan stand in front of you. You are the emperor of the central dynasty. One of them said angrily. This. The emperor pondered for a moment and said with a smile. How about this? When Suyi comes back from the 4 continents, I will ask for her opinion and give you an answer. Okay. The 10 nodded, glared at Dong Qingyuan, and turned to leave angrily. Soon, only the emperor and Dong Qingyuan were left in the hall. Dong Qingyuan frowned and said, Your Majesty, these people are too pedantic. You can't spoil them like this. As long as one wasn't a fool, one could see that Dong Liming and the others didn't have any selfish motives and wanted to save their children. There's no other way. They are my family. Moreover, Father has already instructed me to take good care of them no matter what happens. I can't ignore Father's orders. The emperor shook his head and sighed. Dong Qingyuan was stunned. He said in surprise, Why would the ruler give such instructions? One had to know. The most ruthless emperor family. As the ruler of the world, how could he care so much about family? I don't know. I've also asked Lord Father about this before. However, Lord Father always refused to breathe a word about this topic. Maybe there's a secret behind this. No matter what, I'll do whatever Father tells me to do. You, on the other hand, you have always had a good relationship with the 10 families, but this time, you contradicted them in public for me. They might hate you. The emperor said with a smile. As long as I can share your worries, Your Majesty, I won't complain even if I have to sacrifice my life. Dong Qingyuan immediately knelt on the ground and said righteously, Get up. The emperor smiled. This was what he liked about Dong Qingyuan, his loyalty. Chapter 45-40. Time flew by. Another month passed by. Buzz. That afternoon, the divine voice stone in his arms suddenly rang, waking Qin Feiyang from his seclusion. He took out the divine voice stone and looked at it. His expression was immediately stunned. Immediately, he activated the divine voice stone. An old figure appeared. This person was the blood-haired old man, Brother Qin. The blood-haired old man smiled slightly. What's the matter? Qin Feiyang's expression was very indifferent. Don't be so cold. The blood-haired old man looked helpless. Qin Feiyang said indifferently. Didn't I say that you would give me an answer within 3 days? But now, it seems that more than a month has passed. I can't help it. The higher-ups only gave me an answer now. The blood-haired old man smiled awkwardly. Your efficiency is too low and you have no sincerity. I don't dare to cooperate with you. Don't disturb me in the future, or I will treat you as an opponent like an emperor. After Qin Feiyang said that, he directly turned off the divine voice stone. There was a limit to one's patience. Last time he said that he would ask for instructions, but there was no news for more than a month. It was he who took the initiative to go to Black Tiger Mountain. This time, they said that they would give him 3 days, but they only contacted him after more than a month. Since they took the initiative to cooperate with him, shouldn't they show full sincerity? But from these few contacts, he didn't see any sincerity. Qin Feiyang hated this kind of person the most. They weren't straightforward at all. Who was he trying to impress by putting on a mysterious look all day long? Who would fall for this trick of yours? Buzz. Just as Qin Feiyang was about to put away the divine voice stone, it rang again. Never-ending? Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. He thought it was the blood-haired old man, but when he activated the divine voice stone, he found that the people who appeared were the inner demons and Lu Jiajin. Why is it you guys? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Why can't it be us? The inner demons looked at him puzzled. The two of them were now sitting in a secret room. It was airtight on all sides, and there was a soundproof barrier around them. Looking at Qin Feiyang's reaction, both of them were a little puzzled. Why was it so strange? No, I thought it was those masked men again. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and smiled. Masked man? The inner demons and Lu Jiajin exchanged glances. I didn't notice. Last time in the Myriad Demons Valley, your fleshly bodies were destroyed. The divine sound transmission stone should have been destroyed as well, but why didn't your contract bridge disappear? Qin Feiyang asked in confusion. Why did you bring the divine voice transmission stone when you knew that you were going to die? Lu Jiajin smiled faintly. He had heard of it. Qin Feiyang stared blankly at first, but then he suddenly realized that when they went to the Myriad Devil Valley, they didn't bring the transmission god stone. Since he didn't bring the divine sound transmission stone, he definitely didn't bring any spatial divine items. He really thought it through thoroughly. Because, once the divine sound transmission stone was destroyed, he would have to find them again to establish a contract bridge. This was a very troublesome thing. The inner demons asked suspiciously, What are the masked men you mentioned just now? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, They are just a few insignificant people who want to cooperate with me, but they don't show their sincerity, so I don't want to pay attention to them. There are still people in the Central Dynasty who dare to cooperate with you. The inner demons was surprised. Could it be suddenly? The inner demons seemed to have thought of something and turned to look at Lu Jiajin. Lu Jiajin's eyes flashed. He looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, The masked men you mentioned, are they the ghost masked men who massacred Tianxian City? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. They broke off the contract with you? Lu Jiajin frowned. Yes. After the battle in the Myriad Demons Valley, they came to me and said that they wanted to cooperate with me to overthrow the Central Dynasty. Qin Feiyang said. What's going on? Lu Jiajin was not surprised. Although he had expected that these masked men belonged to a third party, he did not expect that they would go to Qin Feiyang and the others to cooperate. What's wrong? Qin Feiyang looked at the two of them suspiciously. It seemed that he was particularly concerned about these masked men. To tell you the truth, we have already contacted them. Lu Jiajin said. What? They have also contacted you. So do they already know your true identity? Qin Feiyang was surprised. This was not a trivial matter. The true identity of the two of them was a big secret that must not be leaked. No. What I mean by contact is that they came to sneak attack us. Lu Jiajin shook his head. Sneak attack you? Qin Feiyang was stunned. It was really a false alarm. He thought that the identity of the two of them had been exposed. However, another question followed. Why would these masked men sneak attack the inner demons and Lu Jiajin? At first, we thought that they were sent by Dong Qingyuan and Dong Hanzong, but when I saw their sovereign divine weapon self-destruct, I realized that this matter was not so simple. Lu Jiajin said. What? The sovereign divine weapon self-destructed? Qin Feiyang was shocked. No kidding. How could the sovereign divine weapon self-destruct? One had to know. The sovereign divine weapon cared more about its own life than humans. This is what happened in front of us. At that time in the Myriad Demons Valley, Princess Yuxian and Dong Hanzong went to hunt you down. We were about to leave, but at this time, two masked men appeared. If it weren't for the inner demons activating the fighting soul at the critical moment, I'm afraid we would have died in their hands. Lu Jiajin said. It turned out to be a sneak attack in the Myriad Demons Valley. Qin Feiyang muttered. At that time, the battle in the Myriad Demons Valley was quite fierce, so they did not notice what happened behind them. Wait a minute. Fighting soul? At that time, the bodies of the inner demons and Lu Jiajin seemed to have been shattered, leaving only their divine souls. Facing the sneak attack of the masked men, and even the sovereign divine weapon, how could the inner demons activate the fighting soul and kill the other party? I have my own fighting soul now. The inner demons laughed. What fighting soul? Qin Feiyang was stunned and looked at the inner demons curiously. It's a secret for the time being. The inner demons laughed. The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched, and his face was full of helplessness. Why did he have the same personality as the white-eyed wolf and the crazy senior brother? At that time, we guessed that these masked men might be a third party hidden in the central dynasty. As expected. That night, they went to Tianxian City and killed everyone. The world thought it was you who did it, but the inner demons and I knew that it had nothing to do with you. Lu Jiajin laughed. Cousin, you are indeed worthy of being my cousin. You can predict things like a god. Qin Feiyang flattered him. In fact, it was not flattery, because his cousin's brain was indeed very powerful. What do you mean by predicting things like a god? You will know if you use your brain a little bit. The emperor and others can't think of this because they don't know you well enough. Lu Jiajin shook his head. So now, what is the emperor's plan? Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. The inner demons laughed and said, It's not so much the emperor's plan as our plan. What do you mean? Qin Feiyang did not understand at all. Cousin proposed to let the monarch, the divine king, the supreme master of the human clan, Boss Ji and others come to the central dynasty to help. The inner demons briefly told Qin Feiyang about Lu Jiajin's plan. Qin Feiyang looked at Lu Jiajin in a daze. After a long time, he did not say anything and gave Lu Jiajin a thumbs up. This plan was simply amazing. When the monarch and others entered the central dynasty, their plan to destroy the central dynasty would be even more invulnerable. Calculating the time, they should have entered the central dynasty and arrived at the imperial palace soon. Lu Jiajin laughed. Then when the time comes, you have to take good care of them. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. That's a must. The inner demons bared his teeth and said, One more thing, we have also found out about Princess Yuxian's domain of death. Domain of death. Qin Feiyang was shocked. The domain of death was something he had always cared about. This domain of death is not something like a battle soul, but a supernatural power evolved by the supreme master of the divine kingdom with the supreme profound of the law of death. It has a super strong defense. The inner demons introduced. Supreme profound of the law of death? Qin Feiyang was stunned. This was really a new word. As for how it evolved, Princess Yuxian herself is not too sure. She mentioned it before. The domain of death is a life-saving measure left to her by the supreme master of the divine kingdom. It can be used 3 times. Last time in Thousand Demons Valley, she used it once, so there are 2 more times left. The inner demons said. 3 times, Qin Feiyang muttered. In other words, if he wanted to capture or kill Princess Yuxian, he would have to face 2 more battles. This was truly a headache to deal with. Lu Jiajin asked, Also, I heard you got a lot of origin energy from Ji Suyi? Ji Suyi? Qin Feiyang was shocked. Lu Jiajin smiled. She is Princess Yuxian's birth mother. So she is called Ji Sui. Qin Feiyang muttered and smiled. Indeed, I got a lot of origin energy from her. Don't let your guard down. According to our inquiries, the origin energy you obtained from her was only a third of all the origin energy she possessed. Lu Jiajin warned. A third? Qin Feiyang was stunned. This woman actually had so much origin energy in her hands? It was beyond imagination. Of course. It was good to have the inner demons and his big cousin hiding in Imperial Capital Mountain. If they hadn't asked around, he wouldn't have known. If he didn't know, he would have been careless. The consequences would have been unimaginable. Qin Feiyang asked, when the news of Dong Xiaofeng and the others being captured reached the emperor's ears, how did he react? What other reaction could he have? Of course, he was furious. But in comparison, the house heads of the 10 direct descendants were even more anxious. If it weren't for Dong Qingyuan, they would have forced the emperor to give up his origin energy in exchange for the hostages. As for now, the key lies with Ji Sui. Lu Jiajin said. What do you mean? Qin Feiyang was confused. It means to save or not to save, it's up to Ji Sui. If Ji Sui says to save, the emperor will save. If Ji Sui says no, I'm afraid even the 10 direct descendants can't do anything. Lu Jiajin shook his head. It seems Ji Sui's position in the central dynasty is quite special. Qin Feiyang was shocked. Ji Sui was the one to decide the fate of Dong Xiaofeng and the others. Chapter 45-41. Ji Sui's position in the central dynasty is unimaginable. She's been meditating in the Ji family, never bothering with the central dynasty's affairs. Even we didn't pay much attention to her. Now that she's come out, I've seen her strength and courage. She's our biggest enemy. Lu Jiajin shook his head with a bitter smile. She was a low-key person who gave others the wrong impression. You might think she's nothing to fear, but in fact, she's the real boss. We can't underestimate the emperor couple. But this time, it's a bit of a loss. We killed so many people in Myriad Demons Valley, but they all split their souls to save their lives. Qin Feiyang shook his head regretfully. You should be content. Madman's success in transcending the tribulation is already his greatest gain. Plus, you got so much origin energy, and the Kuimping and Dragon God's peak sovereign weapons. The inner demons pursed their lips. By the way, did you manage to subdue the Dragon God and Kuimping's sovereign weapons? Lu Jiajin asked. Not yet. The bones of these 2 sovereign weapons are very tough. I had no choice but to suppress them in Soul Sealing Valley. Qin Feiyang shook his head. These 2 sovereign weapons, one is called Chaos Pagoda, the other Reincarnation Mirror. They're quite powerful, but more importantly, they're about to evolve. You must subdue them. Lu Jiajin warned. Evolve? Qin Feiyang was stunned for a moment before he asked in surprise. You mean that they are about to evolve into legendary Dominator divine weapons? Yes. Lu Jiajin nodded. Then we've found a treasure. Qin Feiyang was overjoyed. This was equivalent to 2 quasi-legendary sovereign weapons. Fine. That's all for now. You can consider working with the Devil-Masked Man, but be careful. Don't be sold off and help them count the money. Lu Jiajin said. Sell us? That depends on whether they have the ability. Qin Feiyang sneered, turned off the stone, and prepared to continue comprehending the law of devour. However, the divine voice-transmitting stone sounded again. Qin Feiyang frowned and looked down. The person who sent him the message this time was the blood-haired old man. After pondering for a moment, Qin Feiyang finally activated the divine sound transmission stone. The illusionary figure of the blood-haired old man appeared and blurted out without wasting any time. Brother Qin, it's all our fault. Can you give us another chance to work together? Qin Feiyang remained silent. This old man knows that you must think that we are dragging our feet. However, we also have our difficulties and must consider all kinds of risks. Therefore, I hope that you can understand. The blood-haired old man smiled. All right, I'll think about it. Qin Feiyang nodded. How long do you need to consider? The blood-haired old man hurriedly asked. As long as he could think about it, There was still hope. Depends on my mood. After saying that, Qin Feiyang directly turned off the voice transmission stone. Why should we cooperate just because you said so? I have a temper too, okay? You've made me wait for so long. Now I'll let you have a taste of waiting. Sigh. Black Tiger Mountain. The blood-haired old man sighed and put away the stone. He turned to look at two figures not too far away, his old face full of helplessness. Of the two figures, one was the young man. The other person was also wearing a ghost mask. His figure was tall and slender, and his face could not be seen clearly. But whether it was the young man or the blood-haired old man, they both looked at him with respect. It's fine. Let's wait patiently. I'm sure he'll come to us. Because with their power, they can't destroy the central dynasty. It was a young voice. His tone was full of confidence. The next morning, Imperial Palace. One figure after another landed in front of the Imperial Palace. Their leader was Ji Suyi. Next was the king, the divine king, the leader of humanity. Boss Ji and the other elders stood in the back, expressionless. Although it was their first time entering Imperial Capital Mountain, they weren't surprised or excited. On the contrary, they were disgusted by what they saw. Seniors, please come in. When the guards opened the palace gates, Ji Suyi turned to Boss Ji and the others and smiled politely. A group of people entered the Imperial Palace one after another. Call His Majesty. Ji Suyi whispered to a guard as she entered the palace. Yes. The guard bowed and replied. Then he tore through the sky like a bolt of lightning. Ji Shaoyi followed and smiled at the king and the others. Make yourself at home, everyone. Boss Ji and the other elders didn't hold back. As for the king, the divine king, and the leader of humanity, they were more or less reserved. Come in. After greeting the elders, Ji Suyi looked at the other guard at the door. The guard ran in. Ji Suyi asked, did anything happen in the central dynasty while I was gone? This. The guard hesitated. When the monarch and the others heard this, they couldn't help but look at the guard. Now, they desperately wanted to know what happened to Qin Feiyang and the others. Perhaps the guard had something they wanted to know. Speak. Seeing the guard so hesitant, Ji Suyi's heart grew uneasy. After you left, two things happened. First, Tianxian City was bathed in blood. Aside from Dong Liming and Dong Xiaofeng, a small number of people who went out to train, as well as the Heavenly Will experts who rebuilt their bodies in Imperial Capital Mountain, were all killed. Second, the sons and daughters of the 10 main families, including your nephew Ji Mingho, were kidnapped by Qin Feiyang and the others at 8 Immortal Mountain. The guard said nervously. What? Ji Suyi had just sat down, but when she heard this, she stood up with a face full of anger. Dong Liming. At the same time. Hearing this name, Boss Ji and the elders' eyes flashed with murderous intent. Tianxian City was bathed in blood. Ji Suyi muttered. Qin Feiyang and the others did it? Yes. The guard nodded. Damn it. Ji Suyi clenched her fists. Then why did Ji Mingho and the others get kidnapped by Qin Feiyang at 8 Immortal Mountain? The guard said. It seems they went to talk to Dong Xiaofeng and accidentally bumped into Qin Feiyang. Why would they go to 8 Immortal Mountain at this time? Isn't that ridiculous? Ji Suyi was furious. How did the house heads react? The guard said. The house heads hoped His Majesty would fulfill Qin Feiyang's conditions and rescue Ji Mingho and the others. What conditions? Ji Suyi frowned. 1 life, 10,000 strands of origin energy. The guard answered honestly. What a big appetite. Ji Suyi was furious. In a short span of 3 months, such a big thing had happened. The guard said. His Majesty was hesitant, so he said he would wait until you returned from the 4 continents. Phew. Ji Suyi took a deep breath and sighed. How could I not understand His Majesty's thoughts? He doesn't want to rescue anyone. You may leave. Yes. The guard left the hall. The monarch and the others looked at each other, smiling. They didn't know what was going on, but from Ji Suyi's anger, it wasn't hard to see that Qin Feiyang and the others were doing well in the central dynasty. It seemed their worries in the 4 continents were unnecessary. Seniors. The central dynasty's situation is not optimistic. Seniors, I hope you can put aside your personal grudges and work together to get through this crisis. Ji Suyi looked at Boss Ji and the elders and spoke with sincerity. It's no use telling us. You should tell the monarch. As long as he meets our conditions, we will help you kill Qin Feiyang and the others. Boss Ji said flatly. Seeing Boss Ji's stubbornness, Ji Suyi was helpless. Whoosh! At this time, figures arrived one after another. Their leader was the monarch. Next were Dong Qingyuan, Dong Hanzong, Dragon God and Kuan Peng. Greetings, Your Majesty. The monarch and the others looked at each other and bowed. Rise, rise. The monarch was very friendly. He looked at the three and sighed. I'm so sorry. The 4 continents have suffered so much. Suffered? What do you mean, Your Majesty? The divine king looked at the monarch in confusion. He was clearly playing dumb. It's all because of the origin power. I don't know. What is father thinking? He only gave Neptune and the dragon god origin power, but not you 3. In terms of merit and contribution to the divine kingdom, you 3 far exceed Neptune and the dragon god. The monarch sighed. So that's why. The monarch must have his own plans. As citizens of the divine kingdom, we only need to obey. The divine king chuckled. But he snorted in his heart. Why are you pretending? You're the monarch's son. How could you not know this? Now that you have a favor to ask of them, you're pretending to be innocent? Be a human. You can't be so hypocritical. The God King is truly magnanimous. Even I am ashamed of my inferiority. The monarch shook his head and sighed. He then greeted Boss Ji and the others and apologized. I'm sorry to disturb your cultivation. When the country is in trouble, everyone is responsible. Protecting the divine kingdom and the common people is also our duty. Since the monarch was so hypocritical, why should they be polite? Who doesn't know how to be hypocritical? Well said. Please sit, please sit. The monarch laughed happily, then greeted them and walked up to the throne. Monarch, divine king Jizun and seniors, we meet again. Dong Hanzong also politely greeted the monarch and the group of people. In front of a peerless genius like you, we don't dare to be called seniors. Ji Laosher sneered. Why didn't you be so polite when you went to the village to abuse your power? Dong Hanzong smiled bitterly and said apologetically. Junior is truly sorry for the offense I committed in the past. I hope seniors can forgive me. You think others will forgive you just because you're sorry? Is your face that big? At this time, accompanied by a sneer, Lu Jiajin and the inner demons also stepped into the hall. Dong Hanzong's face instantly turned ugly. Chapter 45-42. Dong Hanzong turned to the 2. Lu Yunfeng, Lu Yuntian, His Majesty the Emperor didn't call you here. We came uninvited, can't we? You have a problem with that. The inner demon snickered. He stared at Dong Hanzong with a dangerous look. Dong Hanzong raised an eyebrow, ready to explode. But then, the inner demons turned to the monarch and shook his head. I didn't think you'd have the guts to come. Don't you know you're here to die? Dong Qingyuan, Kuanpeng, and the dragon god glared at the inner demons. It wasn't easy to get them here. Why are you saying that? What if you scare them away? Death or not, that's none of your concern. Boss Ji snorted and turned to the monarch. Let's get back to business. We can help, even if we die in the central dynasty. But you have to agree to one condition. When the emperor heard this, he frowned and said, Suyi, didn't you talk to them? No. To appease them, I told them to come talk to you. Ji Suyi thought. Why did you leave me with such a huge problem? The monarch smiled bitterly. You did the same. You left me with the problem of saving Ji Mingho and the others. Ji Suyi looked at him with displeasure. You already know? The monarch was shocked. MHM. You think you can hide this from me? Ji Suyi nodded. Ha! The monarch laughed dryly and transmitted. I had no choice. You can't, but I can? I think you just don't want to be the bad guy. Ji Suyi was helpless. If they decided to save Dong Xiaofeng and the others, that would be fine. However, if she decided not to save him, the members of the 10 great clans would surely vent their anger on her. This included her maternal family, the Ji family. All right. Since they're all difficult problems, there's no difference. Let's deal with them one by one. The emperor comforted him and looked at Boss Ji. Senior, I know what your condition is, but the central dynasty is in danger. We must stay united. We can't afford any more trouble. We understand. But we can't get over this hurdle in our hearts. If you don't give us an explanation, we won't be in the mood to deal with Qin Feiyang and the others. Boss Ji said gloomily. Understood. How about this? After the crisis of the central dynasty is resolved, that is, once we get rid of Qin Feiyang and the other scourges, I guarantee that I will give your Purple Gold Divine Dragon clan a satisfactory explanation. The emperor promised. No matter what, he had to appease these people first. What did you say? Wait until Qin Feiyang and the other scourges are eliminated before you give us an explanation. Excuse me, Your Majesty, but you must be joking. Once we get rid of Qin Feiyang and the others, do we still have any value? Will you give us an explanation then? You'll probably chase us back to the 4 great continents. Ji Laoshi sneered. The emperor's eyes flashed with anger, but he suppressed it and said helplessly, Senior, I'm the emperor of the central dynasty. Don't I even have this little bit of credibility? Credibility? Don't mention that word. After that incident, you said that you would give us an explanation. But how many years have passed since then? Have you ever mentioned this matter? If the central dynasty didn't need us this time, we wouldn't even have the chance to meet you, let alone solve this problem. Therefore, the word honor is nothing more than a joke in my eyes. Ji Laoshi had a fiery temper. He wouldn't show any mercy even if he was the emperor. In the face of Ji Laoshi's repeated offense, the emperor couldn't help but feel a trace of hostility rise between his brows. He was the emperor after all. How could he not give him face? Out of curiosity, what's the grudge between you two? The inner demon's voice suddenly sounded. The emperor and his wife frowned and stared at the inner demons as if to say, What's this about? Why are you interrupting? Okay. You can continue. The inner demon smiled. It seemed that this grudge wasn't shallow. Otherwise, the emperor and his wife wouldn't be so wary. Everyone, let me say something. No matter what grudge the Purple Gold Divine Dragon clan has with the top 10 clans, in the face of the current situation, as a member of the Divine Kingdom, we should temporarily put aside our past grudges and unite against the outside world. However, before Dong Qingyuan could finish, Ji Laoshi glared at Dong Qingyuan and shouted, Who do you think you are? Who are you to interrupt in this matter? Dong Qingyuan's expression froze, and he said angrily, I'm the commander of the Death God Army. What's so great about being a commander? Believe it or not, I can crush you with one hand. Ji Laoshi looked at him with disdain. You. Dong Qingyuan was burning with anger. As the commander of the Death God Army, except for the ruler of the Divine Kingdom, the emperor and his wife, and the princess of the Moon Fairy, who dared to be so rude to him. Even the top 10 clans had to give him some face. You're just a dog. Don't jump out. Ji Laoshi also sneered. He raised his head to look at the emperor and said, We are not unreasonable people. However, your previous actions have indeed caused us to be bitterly disappointed. We can temporarily let go of this hatred. However, the condition is that you have to make a blood oath in front of everyone. After you eliminate Qin Feiyang and the others, you guarantee that you will give us a satisfactory explanation. Second brother. Ji Laoshi looked at Ji Laoshi with dissatisfaction. Laoshi, calm down. In the current situation, our divine kingdom really can't have internal strife. Otherwise, others will think that we're all unreasonable old things. Ji Laoshi waved his hand. However, even if they made a concession, the emperor still felt uncomfortable. He was the emperor of the central dynasty, but he was asked to make a blood oath in public. Wasn't this deliberately embarrassing him? Did it hurt his dignity as an emperor? We've already made a concession. If you don't agree, then don't call us heartless. We'll return to the 4 continents right now. Ji Laoshi said in a low voice. Ji Suyi turned to the emperor and spoke. Just agree with them. We'll have to deal with this sooner or later. Plus, they're just asking for an explanation. You'll be the one to decide how you'll explain it, right? The emperor looked at Ji Suyi and took a deep breath. He looked at Boss Ji and the others and nodded. All right, as you wish. I'll make a blood oath. With the oath, a seal entered the emperor's body. Now are all of you satisfied, seniors? Ji Suyi smiled at the old men. Humph. Ji Laosher snorted and turned his head to look elsewhere. Boss Ji and the others were also silent. These old men are all actors. Looking at the group of old people, Lu Jiajin smiled secretly. Actors? The inner demon was slightly taken aback and asked suspiciously. Do you mean that what they are doing now is all an act? Of course it's an act. They've already entered the central dynasty. If they want to kill Dong Liming and the others, wouldn't that be easy? Why waste so much time talking to the emperor? They're doing this to dispel the emperor's worries. Because they have a grudge against the central dynasty. Now that they've finally entered the central dynasty, if they don't ask or say anything, the emperor will be suspicious. Lu Jiajin spoke. I see. The inner demons understood and laughed. They really are actors. But, seeing that they had finally solved this troublesome matter, before the emperor and his wife could breathe a sigh of relief, a second trouble came. Whoosh! Accompanied by the sound of the air being torn apart. 10 figures landed in front of the imperial palace's door like lightning. They were Dong Liming and the other leaders of the 10 main families. Oh no! Ji Suyi's eyes twitched. Didn't they just run into Boss Ji and the others? Of course. Seeing Dong Liming and the others, Boss Ji and the others stood up, their murderous aura undisguised. Dong Qingyuan, Dong Hanzong, Kuanpeng, and Dragon God were ready to fight. The inner demons and Lu Jiajin retreated to the side, crossed their arms, and watched the show. Facing the surging murderous aura, Dong Liming and the others were shocked. They looked at Boss Ji's group and their faces changed. They were in the central dynasty? Did Ji Suyi go to the 4 continents to invite them? They didn't know why Ji Suyi went to the 4 continents, but Ji Suyi went to the 4 continents. Before, when they heard Ji Suyi was back, they were eager to save their children and rushed over. But they didn't expect to run into these people. Memories that had been sealed away for a long time surfaced in his mind. Their hearts couldn't help but tense up. Finally found you. Hand over your life. Ji Old Ten's eyes were filled with murderous intent. In an instant his eyes turned red, as if dyed in blood. Then, he took a step forward and charged towards the 10 people. This is the Imperial Palace. Don't you dare. Dong Qingyuan roared and hurriedly stood in front of Ji Laosher. You dare block my way with your meager strength? Ji Old Ten smiled maliciously. 3,000 clones appeared behind him, filling half the hall. Seeing Ji Old Ten use 3,000 clones without a word, Dong Qingyuan's eyes trembled and his face paled. No matter how strong he was, he didn't dare fight 3,000 clones. Lu Yintian. Come and stop them. In a moment of desperation, he thought of the inner demon's Demon King true body and shouted. Don't order me around. Otherwise I'll cripple you before he does anything. The inner demon's eyes turned cold. I am the Legion Commander. Dong Qingyuan shouted. I'm still your uncle. Scram as far as you can. The inner demon sneered. Dong Qingyuan's eyes widened in anger. A vice commander of the 10th squad dared to disobey the Legion Commander's orders. How preposterous. Dong Hanzong glanced at the inner demons and knew it was time for him to show off. He landed next to Dong Qingyuan and looked at Ji Old Ten. Senior, if you insist on fighting, then don't blame me for being rude. Boom. As he spoke, the Yinkuan domain appeared. Invincible runes, star runes, undying runes. They floated around him, flashing with divine light. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.